shorts, so I'm just gonna keep it real low while I help my friend out here. I'm just gonna, yep, you're good. Oh, no. New background, kind of. The beads are new. I couldn't figure out like a tapestry situation, and then I was like, wait a minute, beads. I still need to like play around with them a little bit. You can see there's like a small gap in them, but I'm pretty pleased with it. And then I'm gonna get, if you guys remember like my cool light at like my original spot that I used some in my last spot, that is gonna end up there as well. So the beads, you can't really tell, but they're like iridescent. So tonight's topic is scary. That's what's crazy, is that it's scary. It's not scary in like a ha-ha way. It's scary in like a real way. I don't know if it's my internet, but Twitch ain't showing up on stream, or stream isn't showing up on Twitch. Ruh-roh, what's going on there? I might end it and restart it. Oh no, it's going on mine. Okay, I think it's fine. I also haven't seen a Twitch chat yet. There they go. Drop the dinner recipe from yesterday. This is so serious. It was super basic. I'll tell you what I did. I just like Googled it and then kind of made it up. So the salad was just like a Caesar salad, the kit. I like the Taylor Farms one, but there's lots of good Caesar salad kits. The chicken, I literally just bought like a pack of raw chicken tenders. I marinated it in buttermilk for a couple hours. I don't really know. It's said to do at least 30 minutes. So like I did it, and then I did a bunch of other stuff for a few, like I didn't time it. So yeah, I marinated the chicken in buttermilk, which I really only made this because I had extra buttermilk and I knew people do that. So I Googled it. And in the buttermilk, I also put some salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika. Not a ton, but just a little bit. It said that that could be good. And then after I marinated it, I dipped it in flour. In the flour, I put like a fair amount of garlic powder, paprika, some cayenne, salt, pepper. Did I already say garlic powder? Yeah. And then after, and like literally put it in the flour, put it in a pan in oil. I put probably like that much oil at the bottom of the pan. Like it was not submerged by any means, but it was like a pretty thick coating across the bottom, probably like maybe a couple tablespoons, I don't know. And then I just cooked it. I use a meat thermometer, so then I just was like, are you done? And a couple pieces got a little bit burned. I think I made it too hot. I put it on high heat, and the first couple I put down got a little bit burned, like before they were cooked all the way through, so they did get a little bit crispy, but they weren't bad. So I think next time I would just do like a medium high heat. And yeah, that was it. Oh, and then the sauce that was with it, that was just ranch mixed with buffalo sauce. I did make the ranch, hence why I had the buffalo, or hence why I had the buttermilk, I mean, but the ranch was from a previous endeavor, and I had it left over, and then I just like mixed the buffalo into it. And making homemade ranch is easy, especially if you have like a mixing, like a stand mixer or like a hand mixer or something. I have a KitchenAid. I got it on Facebook Marketplace, 10 out of 10. So yeah, that's what I made. It was really good. So excited to actually catch one live. So making this was like actually scary. I did most of it today. This is the rise of, I put white Christian nationalism, but honestly it should just say Christian nationalism, because it's like shocking how in recent years it's like not 100% white, which was kind of surprising to me. A lot of first time people in the chat here tonight. Welcome, welcome. Also, I got new lashes and I don't know if I like them or not, and I didn't do a great job on them because I was too lazy to go get my good tweezers, and I used the shitty tweezers that came in the pack, and now I'm paying for my crimes. Thoughts on raised ranches? What is that? You inspired me to get a workplace accommodation. I can wear loop earplugs now. I'm glad it worked for you, baby. And I mean that so genuinely. I'm glad that you had a positive experience. A little jealous, but also mean it genuinely. This stream will fuel my dread, I fear. So what I will say, we have a lot of slides to go through tonight, so we like actually really need to get the fuck into it. We don't end on a negative. I thought we were going to end on a negative. It ends shockingly positive and like hopeful for the future. And yeah, this is really interesting to me. I want to get a couple things out of the way to start before we get into this. We are going to talk about Israel tonight because Israel is connected to Christian nationalism. There is some overlap in that Venn diagram in terms of like people that are passionate about those things. So what I want to remind everyone, like I always do when talking about Israel, is that the government of Israel and Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism is an extremely, extremely old religion, and you can criticize the government of Israel, and you can criticize your thoughts about, or you can criticize people's thoughts and feelings about Zionism without being like derogatory towards the Jewish faith and towards the Jewish people. So because we are gonna talk about that a fair amount tonight, I did just want to like put that out there that like if you want to be hateful and nasty and gross, this is like not the space to do it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of places on the internet that do put up with that. I am not one of them. I was wondering if you could work your magic to have it end on a positive note. I didn't even try. It just did, because what I decided to end it on was statistics over time. And I'll spoiler alert, but we'll get to it. What I thought it was going to be was just like a harsh up for the last 100 years. And that's not what it was. It's up for most of it. But okay, so let's just get into it because we have a lot of slides to go through. I spent a lot of time on this today. I'm actually going to scooch y'all over just a tad on my desktop. Also, call out next week. It's Monday. I'm going on vacation. Woo! I'm really excited. I'm going to the beach. So, some things tonight might be a little bit redundant because we're going to talk about this from a few different perspectives. So, what is Christian nationalism in the U.S.? And we're going to start with just like the wiki definition. Lately, I've kind of been slacking on giving sources, but this one I was really, really on top of my shit. Like, we really have sources. So Christian nationalism asserts that the United States is a country founded by and for Christians. They advocate for a fusion of identitarian Christian identity and cultural conservatism with American civic belonging. And it's been noted to overlap with Christian fundamentalism, white supremacy, Christian supremacy, the Seven Mountain Mandate movement, and dominionism. Most researchers have described Christian nationalism as authoritarian and boundary enforcing, but recent research has focused on how libertarian small government ideology and neoliberal political economics have become part of the American Christian political identity. So, thanks for consistently ensuring this is a safe and educational space. We should at least have one. If anyone knows about the knitting cult lady, she speaks a lot about this too. I need to watch her videos, but this is the thing, is like when I'm scrolling on TikTok, it's because I'm not really in the place of like wanting to intake factual information. I'm more in the place of like wanting to watch like fan edits of Lana Del Rey and like Reno 911. So I save her videos all the time so that like when I do have attention span, I go back to them, but then I forget. So I guess I never have attention span. But anyway, what you will notice tonight is that there's a lot of overlap with different groups, and a lot of groups will rebrand and change their names and things like that. So that's what's going on. So if some of these sound similar to each other, it's because they are. So we're going to pause for the definition of the Seven Mountain Mandate movement. This was coming up a lot when I was looking up Christian nationalism. This is a Christian nationalist movement that calls on believers to take dominion over 7 key spheres of society to instill conservative Christian values. Followers see this as a path to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Critics warn that this is an anti-democratic ideology that undermines pluralism and religious freedom. I'm critics. So these are their 7 mountains that they think God wants them to take over. Religion. Y'all don't have that on lock already? Family. The structure of families in the family unit. I don't think anyone has a problem with you taking control of your own family. It's your family. Education, which is schools and universities. Government and military. Political leadership, laws in the military. Media, news, social media, and information outlets. Arts and entertainment, and business. So that covers a lot. Like those 7 mountains feel like they are the whole country, if you get what I'm saying. The 7 mountains feels, y'all have a lot you want to take over. That's good to know, I guess. Good to know. Hold on, I want to clean my glasses so I literally can't see any of these words or you guys. Wow, my vision's really getting bad. I need to go to the eye doctor. I haven't been in like a year and a half, and I know that's kind of bad. Okay. save some for the rest of us. Y'all remember that scary Illuminati video that was viral in the mid-2000s? Why does this sound like that? Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Because when I was making this, I was like, I feel insane. Like, I was like, I know I look insane and I know I sound insane, but I'm not. And I think I presented it in a way that seems as not unhinged as possible, but it's just unhinged. So if you're talking about it, you sound unhinged. When I was like, oh, and it's connected to the UN plan, and then this court case from the 60s. Like, when I was seeing all the connections and the ripples, I was like, wow, let's be careful about how we talk about this. I feel like one thing I want to say to the CIA or FBI that's watching this, I hope that this is one of your easier projects. I hope that you review this and you're like, nothing to see here, and move along with your night. I'm sure there's many other projects and people you're looking at that are doing things. Welcome to the studio, I guess. I guess you do have the right to learn about this. And what I would say to the FBI, CIA possibly watching this is be open-minded. You know what I'm saying? Let's be open. Because it's always good to be open to new information. So that was the 7 Mountain Theory or 7 Mountain Movement. We could have a whole stream about all of these individual things. This is dominionism, which to me kind of sounds like the same thing, but not really. Dominionism is a political ideology within some parts of evangelical and fundamental Christianity that promotes the belief that Christians are divinely mandated to take control of society by dominating political and cultural institutions. How is that different? This is based on a specific interpretation of the biblical passage Genesis 1:28, which grants humanity dominion over worth. Well, 1, that's a book. And 2, humanity didn't say Christianity. Also, I do want to call out, I don't really know that much about religion. I'm not a part of any one religion. I was raised Unitarian Universalist. So I'm not going to try and get into the specifics of like what different branches of Christianity or Catholicism or Protestantism believe or don't believe. We're talking about Christian nationalism tonight. That's who I'm focused on. And I'm not really going to get into like Jesus or the Bible. Aside from what they have to say about it. So Dominion theory, also known as dominionism, is a group of far-right Christian political ideologies that seek to institute a nation governed by Christians based on their understanding of biblical law. And they want Mosaic law, is that what that says? This is to law that has said to be revealed to Moses by God. This refers to the Torah or the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. So they says dominion theory can include theonomy but does not necessarily involve advocacy of adherence to Mosaic law. The label is primarily applied to Christians. So I guess they read that book and they fuck with that book, but they're being kind of vague about how the law should be our laws. And they're like, no, we don't mean it like that, even though that's what we read, is kind of what I'm gathering. So Christian nationalism also overlaps, but is distinct from theonomy, which is because it is more populist in character. So the theonomy stuff seems like a little more hardcore religious, and the Christian nationalism seems like a little more political. And we're going to focus on more of the political than anything else. Dominionism is just the Book of Mormon rebranded. Can someone explain, because I was saying I don't know that much about religion, what's the difference between Christians and Christian evangelicals? Don't evangelicals believe that the rapture is going to happen? Is that the difference? Can someone confirm if that's right? I could never do this at school. Someone just said I would love to have you as a teacher, Pixel Pipple. I'm sure you would have, but it would not be this. It would not be this at all. So Christian nationalist, who we are talking about tonight, is they believe that our country's founding documents, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, etc., are divinely inspired, and they were supernaturally revealed to Christian men to preference Christianity, and are willing to elect impious heads of state if they support right-wing causes. So basically, these people think that like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton were like writing their stuff, and God and Jesus were like, hey guys, I have an idea. And that's how they made the government. You see what I'm saying when it sounds crazy, but that is what it was. Evangelicals focus on evangelicalism. Well, I don't know what that is either. Oh, AKA tell everyone about Jesus or they're going to hell and it's your fault. Got it. So it kind of seems like all of this is the same shit. I'm sorry. Call me ignorant. Also, did you see the sign is up? The handyman came. He put up the beads too. So is it different? I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. I don't think it's that different. To me, it's the same. To an ignorant, non-religious woman, they're all basically the same. They're just slightly different versions. So, this water is good. Christian nationalism supports the presence of Christian symbols in public square, state patronage for the practice and display of religion, and Christmas as a national holiday, school prayer, singing God Bless America, and the exhibition of nativity scenes during Christmastide and the Christian cross on Good Friday. We'll get into this more later, but a lot of this happened during the Cold War. We're going to go through history after we get done with the basics of what is this. During the Cold War, church attendance reached its high point in the 1950s. This is also when we added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance and on currency, described at the time as civil religion that was motivated to distance ourselves from communism, because communism was like, we do not do religion. Christian nationalism also influenced the Constitution of the Confederacy, which mentioned God overtly in contrast with the U.S. Constitution. I meant to put more on that in here, but I forgot, and it is 120 slides, so we'll have plenty to talk about. So Christian nationalism has been linked towards prejudice, and Christian nationalism prioritizes an ethno-cultural, ethno-religious, and ethno-nationalist framing around the fear of the other, those being immigrants, racial and sexual minorities. Studies have associated Christian nationalism with xenophobia, homophobia, misogyny, political tolerance of racist, I would say political idolization of racist. Actually, I'll take that a step further. Opposition to interracial unions, support for gun rights, pronatalism, pro-birth, and restricting the civil rights of those who fail to conform to traditional ideals of whiteness, citizenship, and Protestantism. So, that's what they have going on over there. It's been associated with a conquest narrative, premillennial apocalypticism, and a frequent rhetoric of blood, specifically of blood sacrifice to an angry God. Their God is like kind of intense. Yes, under God was added later. We will get into the details about it. So, American Christian nationalism is based on the worldview that America is superior to other countries and this is divinely established. They point that Christians are true Americans, so like Americanism and Christianity are like very intertwined. When we know that Christianity is way fucking older than America anyway. Christian nationalism also bears overlap with the American militia movement. These two examples that they gave, I didn't love because they didn't really feel a part of like the mass organized, like very real politically powerful Christian nationalist. These are more just like one-offs, you know? So the examples they give are the Ruby Ridge standoff and the Waco siege, but like I said, those are more like cult followings of their own form of religion and not really, to me, a part of the generally powerful Christian nationalist movement, but that's just one woman's opinion. Christian nationalists feel that their values and religion are threatened and marginalized, so their whole shtick is like a victim complex, and their freedom to preach their moral value will be no longer dominant at best or outlawed at worst. So they kind of believe like, if we're not all the way powerful, everyone's going to try and kill us, which that should make you look inward and think about what you've done. And it's just because they want to be powerful and kill everyone else. Like, it's just projecting, you know what I mean? Because, like, I'm not, like, if you don't feel the desire to exert control over others, you wouldn't feel that way. You know what I'm saying? Studies have shown that Christian nationalists exhibit higher levels of anger, depression, anxiety, and emotional distress, and it has been theorized that they fear not living up to God's expectations and they fear wrath and punishment of not creating the country desired by God. This sounds like a lot of responsibility. lot of weight on these people's shoulders. A lot that they have going on. If only they could just leave. Oh wait, they can. So it's been present in America forever, basically. Like from day one of the United States government. Obviously there were people here before the U.S. government that didn't believe this. That would be the indigenous people. They're not down with this. I think that goes without saying. So in a recent book, sociologist Samuel Perry from the University of Oklahoma. Being a sociologist at the University of Oklahoma, oh, you were in the trenches. You were doing the most important work of us all. Everyone else can fuck off because what you're doing is more important. Appreciate the technical breakdowns being followed by that's a lot of work. Why do they have such a focus on fear? It makes sense how we got here today. How we got here today makes so much sense after this. That's why I think this is going to end on a happy note, because when I finished this, I was like, I feel like I understand now. And the first step to fixing it is understanding it. So where'd I go? So he traces Christian nationalism back to the late 1600s, which like is before the U.S. government. So that's why I said forever. Like it's been here, it's older. Adherents believe the idea that America was founded by Christians who modeled its laws and institutions after Protestant ideals with a mission to spread the religion and those ideals in the face of threats from non-whites, non-Christians, and immigrants. So this is also very much prevalent in the story we get told about like the colonists and whatever, which like a lot of it's bullshit, but the story about like they wanted religious freedom, they came here for their religion, like religion and Christianity has been baked into it from the beginning, not in the way that these people are saying with our government documents. That's not fucking true. But culturally speaking of like white Americanism and the white colonist, there is an element of religion there. So it makes sense that it goes back to before the Declaration of Independence was even written. Why is there a polar bear in Mount Arlington, Texas? Is that sociologist in Oklahoma? What was I about to say? It was good. Oh, to me, this fact about Christian nationalism going back to the 1600s does not make Christian nationalism more legitimate. To me, it takes away any legitimacy it had. I never gave it any. Because the modern Christian nationalist, they're like, the founding fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution because of Jesus and religion. And this is saying that people were talking about this before those documents were written. So that means when those men went to go write those documents, they made an explicit choice to make it not that. Because people were talking about that and it had some popularity to it. So they chose to not do that. So I don't know how the rumors kept getting out of hand from there. So Christian nationalism roots come hundreds of years ago, but it bubbles up throughout different time periods in history. We're going to talk about some of the more modern ones. It's usually amplified by war, heightened immigration, and economic instability. If you think about it that way, the period we're in right now is a perfect storm. We're always at war. War. So their main claim is that the Constitution is a Christian document, but they're wrong about that because not all the founding fathers were explicitly Christian. A lot of them were Protestant, but a lot of them practiced deism as well. And then some of the contemporaries, George Washington, John Adams, maintained their Orthodox Christian faith. But this is some of the diversity. Deism is a prominent belief system that did influence our Constitution. But it's basically the belief that there was a supreme being that created the universe, and then he decided, or she or they or whatever, decided not to intervene through miracles or affairs. So they basically think God created the universe and then God said good luck with that. That's part of why they wrote the fucking Constitution, because they were like, God has abandoned us. That's fine. We'll take it from here. That was kind of their belief. Another was theistic rationalism. Some of them combined Enlightenment thought with religious belief, leading to a system where God's existence was accepted, but divine intervention and miracles were rejected as irrational. And then a couple of them were Orthodox Christian and were part of the Protestant denominations. Didn't the Protestants have beef with the Catholics? Yeah, that's a whole thing. So I can't even get into that, mainly because I don't understand it, but also because I don't really care. So where they're saying the founding fathers were Christian men, some of them yes, some of them no, some of them were Christian in a different way. That's just not true. It's just objectively not true. Thomas Jefferson was a prominent proponent of deism. He created his own edited version of the Bible, removing sections he considered miraculous or superstitious. I want to read that shit. So that's what I mean. Thomas Jefferson was very educated on religion and made a choice to not put it in the framework of our government. Benjamin Franklin was also a deist, but he did also participate in Christian revival meetings. He had a very complex personal faith. He was also hanging out with hot bitches in Paris. So That's what he had going on. And then George Washington was a strong Christian, but later in life, he refused to participate in communion, which was, for some people, they thought that was a sign that he was actually a deist. So the kind that they think God created the universe and then like fucked off. So basically, the Christian nationalists are wrong. We knew that, but I just wanted to say it. In his first term, Thomas Jefferson declared his firm belief in separation of church and state. He said, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account not man and God, man and his God. His God. His God. His God. And that the legislative powers of the government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate the sovereign revenants that the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislators should make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof. This is where we get like separation of church and state. So it's been like from the jump, like they've been pretty focused on it. So we're going to read this article. It's from 2023. A senior at Brown University wrote it. And we are going to take many sidetracks from this article, and then we will come back to it. So if we are on this color slide, that means we're on the article. This is going to anchor us throughout a very long journey we're going to go on. This article is from Reese Long. It's titled Origin Story, the History of Christian Nationalism is Littered with Hate and Extremism. So, this is the author, that's why I'm reading it like them. I don't know what their gender is. During my summer internship with America's United, religious extremism was the central focus of my work. It was also the primary motivation behind my decision to major in religious studies. The rise of Christian nationalism in particular has colored my educational work, life, and life experiences over the last 8 years. I was a freshman in high school during the 2016 election. This, for me and many others, created like the real world circumstances, church and state, blah, blah, blah. I had a hard time getting past. I was a freshman in high school during the 2016 election. Yeah. Yeah. I was a freshman in college, so not that much older, but didn't love reading that sentence. Can we popcorn read it? Y'all kill me. So, but I thought when I read that, I almost like X'd out of the article and was going to be like, I can't do this. But it's a really good article. And honestly, young people are the ones talking about this. So whatever. And then you'll see he interviews a professor and a historian at a university. So I more care about, and the article is dominated by the professor. It's this college student interviewing him, which I was like, okay, we're good. We're good. We are good. We are good. It seemed as if this wall had come tumbling down overnight. Suddenly, I saw the power of the forces that sought to ban marriage for same-sex couples, overturn Roe v. Wade, and legalize discrimination in the name of religion. A new threat had sprung up from the depths to make an extreme interpretation of Christianity the law of the land. Christian nationalism had entered my world. Except, turns out that's not quite how it happened. So this is a kid that's like, I'm seeing Christian nationalism, they want to look into it, so they interview a professor at their internship is what we're reading. So Christian nationalism had not appeared overnight. The term and belief have had a much longer history. Christian nationalism has begun snaking its way through society since at least the 1920s. We know it goes back even further, depending how you define it. Christian nationalism is a specter that has been haunting America for 100 years at least, more than 100, and even if it only entered the mind of the average American a decade ago. To gain a better understanding, I sat down with Professor Seth Coulter of Willamette University, a historian with an interest in the American right wing. So, thank God a grown-up is here. This is the grown-up. You can tell he's trustworthy and not a Republican from his glasses. It's a little bright. I'm just feeling a little bright in here today. I kind of want like the cover of darkness to talk about this. So, we're still on this same article. Kotler began discussing our discussion by informing me that Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith is the man to blame for Christian nationalism. I am now going to be referring to what I call modern Christian nationalism, which is Christian nationalism after 1900. Like we talked about, Christianity has been like a part of this country from the jump. The nationalism around it has been part of the country from the jump. But we're going to really start with like 1900s because that's just a little bit more manageable for us. I had a first-year history teacher during the 2016 election. Poor guy. Oh, God. So, Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith. In most of this, he's just referred to as Smith. He was a political organizer for Huey Long, the senator, in the 1930s. He was a fascist, a rabid anti-Semite, and a rabid anti-communist. In the 1940s, he started the Christian Nationalist Crusade and the Christian Nationalist Party, the America First Party, and the extremist monthly publication called The Cross and the Flag, which I saw someone mention earlier. Smith was, as Kotler describes him, someone who believed that communism was a Jewish plot and that communists used black people as their pawns to try and overthrow white Christian American civilization in the name of communism. So, that says it all. That's his beliefs. We're going to sidetrack from that article and talk about Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith. So we're going to be talking about this motherfucker for a while. You see how I changed colors? When we get back to that color, that's how you know we're back on the article. And I'll tell you, I was like really locked in today, you can tell. So he was born in 1898. He was an American disciple clergyman, politician, and organizer known for his populist and far-right demagoguery. I don't know how to say that. He began his career as a leader of the populist Share Our Wealth movement during the Great Depression. So he started working with Huey Long during the Great Depression. Huey Long was famous during the Great Depression. He did a bunch of stuff in the government. He was a senator. But after Huey Long died, was he assassinated? I don't know. After Huey Long died, Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith shifted away from wealth redistribution and towards anti-communism and anti-Semitism. What do you mean that you started your career as an advocate of wealth distribution and now you're staunchly anti-communist? Kind of seems like me, the only moral you have is advancing your career. So let's get into this motherfucker because he's like the OG of the modern Christian nationalist that we experience today. So let's talk about Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith, Huey Long, and Share Our Wealth. Upon his move to Shreveport, Louisiana, shortly after the stock market crash, Smith began to engage in politics. He became chaplain of the Louisiana American Federation of Labor and delivered a keynote at the Louisiana chapter meeting of the American Bankers Association. He also began preaching radio sermons calling for social reform and denouncing Standard Oil Company. So he's like very much on like an anti-capitalist vibe. Like he's with unions, he's talking about wealth redistribution. He met with Governor Huey P. Long, who maintained a law office there. His friendship with Long ultimately forced his resignation from the church in 1933. So because he became friends with Huey Long, the church was like, we don't fuck with you right now. And he resigned from his church. As many of the congregation were opposed to Long. Following his resignation, Smith allegedly turned towards fascist politics by contacting William Dudley Pelley and attempting to reach Adolf Hitler to discuss Semitic and anti-German propaganda. Semitic, he's using for Jewish. Like anti-Semitic is something that's like hateful to Jewish people. But also the word Semitic, correct me if I'm wrong here, Semitic just refers to the people in that region. It does not refer to a specific religion. So technically Palestinian people are Semitic by the definition I read. But again, not 100% sure about that. So this guy goes from being like wealth distribution in the United States, actually, fuck it, Hitler. This is why I felt crazy when I was making this, because I was like, oh, and now Hitler's here. How did we get there? This is another account of his like early career in time. So apparently he was born in Wisconsin. He was a third generation of a disciple of Christ, a minister. He rose from poverty and became the greatest rabble-rouser since St. Paul. While a student of biblical history at Valparaiso University, he began preaching in Gary and Deep River, Indiana. His sermon at the 1922 St. Louis Ministerial, I think that's right, convention prompted his call to become the pastor of the Seventh Christian Church in Indianapolis. So he was like a religion guy before he was a preacher guy. I probably should have put this first. He also became president of the Marion County Sunday School Union. He's rising up in the church. He intended to remain in Indianapolis, but then his wife got tuberculosis, which is why they moved to Shreveport, and that's where he left the ministry for politics and became the chief organizer for the Share Our Wealth movement. So that's a lot. And then the church, he resigned before the church fired him. because the church was like, we don't like that you're doing that. And he was like, then I'll quit because this pays better. Oh, fuck. Me in Marion County, Indianapolis right now. Everything is tuberculosis. It all goes back to tuberculosis. So in 1934, Huey Long formed the Share Our Wealth Society. This proposed minimum and maximum limits on household wealth, and Smith was the national organizer. Smith wrote, in order to succeed, a mass movement must be superficial for quick appeal, fundamental for permanence, dogmatic for certainty, and practical for workability. So it seems like the only thing he cares about is like power and money and like power, literally. So Smith delivered campaign speeches for Share Our Wealth throughout the country. They described him as a combination of Savonarla and Elmer Gantry. Apparently, the first one is a historic preacher, and Elmer Gantry is a dramatic film about a confidence man. And oh wait, that's from later, so that can't be wrong. Elmer Gantry, I guess, was it earlier? I don't fucking know. Anyway, they said he was like a really intense speaker. He often drew crowds of large supporters and hecklers, and in 1935, he boasted to a reporter that he might, this is a quote, duplicate the feat of Adolf Hitler in Germany. And that was in 1935. So like he was like on that early. Like he was paying attention to the German news like before the war really escalated. Behind the scenes, he encouraged Huey Long to challenge President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1936. After Long was assassinated, I was right, he was assassinated. So, like, again with the Hitler shit. Like, he tried to contact Hitler. He's quoted being like, I'm going to do what Hitler did. Like, he's not exactly making it a secret. So, after Huey Long was assassinated in 1935, Smith failed to take control of Huey Long's supporters in Louisiana, and he was basically expelled from the state, and he was fired from Share Our Wealth, and then Share Our Wealth was abolished. So, yeah. So he kind of a disorganized loser. It's crazy how January 6th can be tied to this fucking loser. Cool. I love this gif of Bethany Frankel. It's like probably my favorite thing on the planet. Do you think they ever believed in wealth equality, or do you think he just did it to gain an audience? I'm 85% sure he just did it to gain an audience. 15% of me thinks that maybe he believed it at first, and then as soon as he got an audience, he was like, oh, this is better. It's a good thing that we're such a mess as a country that we can't succeed in fascism. Don't say that too soon, baby. This is just phase one. So I know we're spending a lot of time on this guy, but it is critically important. After departing Louisiana, he campaigned in Georgia for a white supremacist governor, Eugene Talmadge, who intended to oppose Roosevelt in 1936. And then Smith joined Franklin Townsend, an advocate of pension reform, on the incorrect belief that Townsend had acquired Huey Long's mailing list. So that's another fun fact that tells me he doesn't give a fuck about individual issues. He gives a fuck about money and power and status. That's all he cares about. Because he went back to this, like, economic thing, which was kind of where he started, but it was just for this mailing list, but then he was wrong about the mailing list. So Smith soon ingratiated himself to Townsend against the misgivings of many of Townsend's advisors. In November 1935, Smith convinced Townsend to join Charles Coughlin, an anti-Roosevelt Roman Catholic priest, back to William Lemke for president to oppose. In Smith's words, the communistic philosophy of Roosevelt advisors Frankfurter, Ickes, Hopkins, and Wallace. So he hates Roosevelt, which is classic. Late in the 1936 campaign, Smith announced his intent to form an independent movement to oppose communism and seize the government of the United States. He claimed support from 10 million patriots. Where have we heard that verbiage before? I believe in you. Willing to sacrifice their lives to prevent an international plot to collectivize the United States. And he said he had support from wealthy donors who would provide 1% of their annual income to make America vigorously nationalistic. Townsend promptly disowned Smith and Lemke's campaign manager and expelled him from the Union Party despite his protest. Coughlin ignored the controversy, having already developed antipathy towards Smith during the campaign. In the fall of 1936, Smith returned to Louisiana to join former Governor James A. Noe in a tour of Louisiana in which the two rallied against Governor Richard Leahy's sales tax on luxury items. So, like, what are you fucking for? Like, he changes stances so many times. He's like, share our wealth, taxes are bad, pension reform. Like, he's doing everything. No charge that Lech sold out Roosevelt to finance Social Security. On October 22nd, he was punched in the face after delivering a radio talk in New Orleans. On the night before the election, he was arrested for disturbing the peace, reviling the police, and using obscene language after attacking Leahy on statewide radio. Despite the boast of Smith, Townsend, and Coughlin, the Union ticket only received 2% of the national vote, mostly in Catholics' precincts where Coughlin's popularity was the strongest, and within 2 years, the party collapsed entirely. So it was not that important. I just brought up the Union Party to show how these people were, like, so incompetent. Like, they were fighting with each other, they had disagreements, they kept changing their mind on everything, and they didn't win any of the vote. It's actually sickening how recycled all of this narrative is. It's the exact talking points today. I know, it's spooky. So, moving on, we're still on Gerald Lyman Kenneth Smith. He's still up to no good. Now he makes the America First Party. So he fucking failed at the Union Party, so he's moving on from here. As European tensions rose, we're like smack in the middle of World War II now. With the ascendancy of the Nazi Party in Germany, Smith tried to form an alliance with the non-interventionist America First Committee, but did not succeed. Non-interventionist were Americans that did not think we should get involved in World War II. They were like, that has nothing to do with me. Absolutely not. So in 1943, Smith formed the America First Party, essentially appropriating the name. So he is literally just a grifter. That's my full belief and stance at this moment. He became a member of William Dudley Paley's fascist Silver Legion of America, which was patterned after Hitler's brown shirts. Paley was later convicted for violating the Espionage Act and sentenced to 15 years in prison, but he was acquitted in 1944 for violating the Alien Registration Act. So that's his friend. Smith told an audience of silver shirts, "We're going to drive that cripple out of the White House," referring to FDR. After moving to Michigan, Smith ran for United States Senate as a Republican, but he lost in the primary. He ran as the America First Party candidate in the 1944 election, winning 1,700 votes. With the running mate Harry Romer on the Christian Nationalist Party ticket, he received 48 votes. Smith's only other bid for the presidency was in 1956, where he received 8 write-in votes in California. Of his run for president, Smith biographer Glenn Jeansone wrote, "Smith was fascinated by the office of the President of the United States. Gerald Smith ran for president because he lusted for power, but his hatred for Jews and his relentless crusade against them had no such rationale motivation." I grew up in Indiana and I live in Michigan. I can't escape this man. So in 1947, he ran for president a bunch of times, backtracking to 1947. He was speaking at a rally at the Washington Monument. He announced a new name, the Christian Nationalist Party, to replace the America First Party. We're on party number 3, third party at this point. The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith cited Smith's Christian nationalist crusade, along with some other stuff and the KKK, as organized anti-Jewish organizations, which had significant influence, resources, and membership. In late 1947, he moved CNC offices from Detroit to St. Louis. So he's literally just like a grifter and a failed politician. This is a picture of him. It doesn't say when it's from, but this little bio. Smith leading his crusade in 1936. Smith, the blank anti-communist preacher of the 1930s and 40s, speaks in a 1936 rally for Christian Nationalist Crusade, a strident right-wing anti-communist organization he founded. He devoted later years to a newsletter and less visible activities. Oh, this was his obituary when he died. That's what this is. So, we're still talking about him, unfortunately. Having visited Los Angeles in 1943, he traveled there every year, and after purchasing a home, he moved his headquarters to LA in 1953. It was in LA that he would intersect with key figures that would emerge in the Christian identity movement, including Conrad Girard, some other people. Smith incorporated religious issues to further his political goals by mobilizing the support of the Christian identity. Prior to Smith's involvement in this identity movement, it had been largely a fractured amalgamation of various British Israel groups and other derivative groups such as the Klan. Smith's organizational skills and ability to cultivate prominent figures like Wesley Swift, assisted in coalescing the identity into a more collaborative group of churches and individuals. So that's why I felt like it was so important to go through like pretty much his entire shit, because like he's the one that brought a lot of groups together and created this movement, and it was literally just because he, wanted power. Apparently he may not have actually been a believer himself. Oh, shocker. And simply used the idea as a network to further his political agenda. On the side of considering Smith a believer, he once wrote of Wesley Swift that he opened up a Bible, he identified the true Israel, which gave us the Messiah, blah, 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 blah. Basically, some of his friends were doubting him. So this proves my theory that almost all religious figures are just failed politicians and grifters. And by religious figures, I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about people that are alive asking others for money. So I don't really understand this, and it's boring, but we'll try and get through it. So Smith regularly penned religious articles in his Christian Nationalist Crusade publication, The Cross and the Flag, which would indicate a leaning towards serpent seed doctrine, whatever that fucking means. So ultimately, Smith's importance to Christian identity was a role he played in linking together previously disjointed West Coast identity community and his association with the Christian Nationalist Crusade. I'll skip over some of this because I want to talk about other stuff, and it's already been 45 minutes. So this is his monthly publication called The Cross and the Flag. It says, where is Niles, the Slorg mystery, Jews fight MacArthur? Yeah, it's crazy people talk. So this is from 1942. This is a picture of him with Bernard Doman on the right. Apparently, The Flag and the Cross is now a book about how this is a threat to democracy. So check that out maybe if you want to. So post-war activities, he did have to go to jail for 60 days for contempt of court and misconduct at the trial of a different guy who was charged over inflammatory comments towards racial groups. And his publicity agent was sentenced to 30 days in jail. In the early 1950s, at the time of the appointment of Anna M. Rosenberg as Assistant Secretary of Defense, the Anti-Defamation League published an article attributing attacks to Rosenberg's loyalty to professional anti-Semites and lunatic nationalists. So that was him, basically. And they called him Little Fuhrer, which is like Little Hitler. And then he joined a strong campaign against the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act. Apparently that needs a citation on Wiki. Forgot to delete that. He called it a Siberia bill, saying that it was a communist plot to hospitalize and brainwash Americans. And he also called for deportation of Jewish people and African Americans. I'm not sure where you deport African Americans to. African Americans, 14th Amendment. They're citizens. Where is my question? In 1959, The Cross and the Flag and the Christian Nationalist Crusader magazine claimed that 6 million Jewish people were not killed in the death camps in World War II, but instead they immigrated to the United States during the war. So, we're going to talk about the Israel stuff. We're going to talk about why anti-Semitic, but also love Israel. What's going on there? We'll talk about it. So in his last years, he moved to Arkansas. He bought and renovated a mansion. He only had $5,000 to hit his name in 1963, yet raised $1 million by the spring of 1964 to construct the Christ of the Ozarks project. He's a grifter. This man is grifting. So although the park was never fully developed, the statue is at a mountain. It overlooks the town. Yeah, he had money for this. Someone says that it's glitching. Let me know if that's your experience. Yes, I do post the recordings to this. As a Black person, I've been begging to go back for you. Don't say that too loud to them. So this is another account of this time, and it's basically, I'll just skip over this. It's basically just a shorter version of what we just talked about. So that was a lot. But it was the foundation of the movement, so I felt it needed to be detailed, but also it was chaotic as fuck. So if you should take away anything from that, is that this movement doesn't even have like real tangible origins of competent people ever doing good work. I could not find that anywhere in here at all. So before we get into the rest of that original article, we're going to talk about adding under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, because that was around this time where we talked about the Smith guy in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So Eisenhower added under God to the Pledge of Allegiance during the Cold War. This was in 1954. He signed a bill to insert the phrase under God into the pledge that children recite every morning. Previously, the original pledge that was written in 1892 did not have any reference to religion. A grifter is like a scammer. A grifter is someone that goes for like town to town and just scams people. That's what they do. So it's like kind of a slur, but towards scammers. So I think that's okay. So the push to add under God gained momentum during the Red Scare. So just how before, where we were talking about how the nation kind of embraced Christianity more as a way to be like, look, we're not communist. That's where the under God thing came from. Many conservatives regarded communism as godless. So they felt like God being in our money and our pledge and all of that made us more anti-communist. Do kids still say the pledge nowadays? Not at my school. We don't say the pledge. Sorry if someone gets mad at that. Court cases about whether students should recite the pledge have reached the Supreme Court in the 1940s before under God was added, and in the decades after, there were numerous other lawsuits added to the pledge. So the first version of the pledge was written for the Columbian Exposition to mark the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival to America, so not a great origin to begin with. Historians have long identified its author as Francis Bellamy, but apparently it came out that he might have stolen it from a boy that submitted it to the magazine that he owned or was in charge of. So, yeah. As a marketing gimmick, he put together a program for schools to use the Columbian Exposition, and successfully lobbied Congress to support the program. Part of this program was the Pledge of Allegiance, which originally read, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." So it literally just wasn't in there. Like, that just wasn't in there. Like the magazine's other marketing strategies, which included sending flags and pictures of George Washington to schools, the pledge was a part of a push for Americanization. Bellamy was one of the many Protestant Americans of Northern European heritage. I forgot to tell you guys, a kid said the funniest thing to me the other day. They're taking U.S. history right now, so I asked how it was going and what they were learning about. This is actually like a month ago. It was at the beginning of the school year. And they were learning about, like, the indigenous people and the colonists, and they said, yeah, I'm learning about when the Europans came over. And I said, who? And he goes, the Europans? And I was like, Europeans? And he was like, yeah, the Europans came over and were killing everybody. And I was like, they were. Where was I? Bellamy was one of many Protestant and Northern European Americans who believed that the new immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe were harmful to the American way of life. I think I talk about this in another stream, how like they had like the new immigrants versus the old immigrants, and a lot of the immigrants that came from like Great Britain were like, ew, Italians, disgusting. That's kind of what was going on at this time. So World War II and the standardization of the pledge. Over the next few decades, schools and organizations that chose to recite the pledge used a variation of the Youth Companions version, or they made up their own pledges. And in 1942, just over 6 months after World War II, FDR signed the flag code and standardized the pledge. So we didn't even really have an official pledge until 1942. And in 1940, the court ruled in the Minersville School District that forcing Jehovah's Witnesses to recite the pledge was not a violation of religious freedom. 3 years later, they reversed the decision involving another Jehovah's Witness case, saying that forcing students to recite the pledge is a violation of their First Amendment rights. So that was before they even put the under God in there. And then Eisenhower added the under God as a fight against communism. And to omit the words under God in the pledge is to omit a definitive factor in American life, said a preacher. It's literally not in the original thing. With Eisenhower on board, the campaign to adopt the phrase had more momentum, and then on Flag Day, Eisenhower signed the bill, and then 2 years later, "In God We Trust," was made the United States official motto, and it did not appear on paper currency or stamps before the 1950s. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about this because I think this is a really good example of how, even though Christian nationalism in the 30s and 40s was like a failure, like we were all just making fun of that Smith guy, we were like, what a fucking loser, what a grifter, it pushed our Overton window on religion. This got more people talking about religion in a governmental sphere. If you don't know what the Overton window is, basically there's a spectrum of different behaviors. And everything on the far ends of the spectrum you view as like weird and crazy, and you're like, I can't unfathom that, like it's unthinkable. The middle of the spectrum is the Overton window. That's what you think is acceptable. Or even if you don't agree with it, you think it's like fine for people to think that. Your Overton window will move the more you've been exposed to stuff. So I think punching someone in the face, I think that's unacceptable. But if I was in prison for 3 years and was fighting every single day, my Overton window on violence would shift because I was being exposed to it so often. That's what's happening with religion and politics here. In the 1950s, people weren't really like pushing back on this that much because think about what we just talked about was prevalent earlier. I think it's just like, it's very interesting. So now we're gonna go back to that Americans United article with that guy that was interviewing the professor. We're back there. I told you it was gonna be our anchor. So Smith, this guy Smith, peddled the myth that Americans Christian was founded on Christianity to his base, including his publication. His view of Christian was pretty narrow. Catholics and Mormons were not included in his Christian nationalist umbrella. Kotler explains that the idea that America belongs to Christian people, to white Christian people, and that others may be tolerated as kind of guest visitors and second-class Americans, but not real Americans like us, builds upon a history that is surrounded by patriotism around the founding fathers and how Christian they were, which we know is not true. Christian nationalism has always been deeply rooted in anti-Semitic and fascist beliefs. What has changed, however, is that Christian nationalism has seen increased influence among the right wing, so it's getting more popular. Kotler attributes this to the lack of counterweights against Christian nationalism in the religious community. One thing that is different is that the counterweight to this Christian nationalism was always the mainline Protestant churches. What folks understood, which is the point that the founders understood, is that you separate the church and state to protect the purity of the church. For the founders, the idea to keep the state out of the church and in name of keeping the church focused on its spiritual mission. He cites the 1962 Supreme Court ruling to ban sponsored prayer in public schools as a turning point with contemporary Christian nationalism, especially regarding its wider embrace by the American right. The set of rulings, Engel versus Vitale and Abington School District versus Schempp, angered certain people within Christianity and gave Christian nationalists new material to recruit a newly outraged crowd. So Christian nationalism isn't old, but they've had more and more things that have inflamed it and gotten them to grow. So this is the ruling of Engel versus Vitale. My students call this guy the bald baddie. He does like AP social studies classes on YouTube.
History, and furthermore, welcome to another video on your required Supreme Court cases for the AP government curriculum. In this video, we're going to be considering everything you need to know about the land. Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimler's History, and furthermore, welcome to another video on your required Supreme Court cases for the AP government curriculum. In this video, we're going to be considering everything you need to know about the landmark case Engel v. Vitale. So if you're ready to get them brain cows built separation of church and state style, well, then let's get to it. So as always, let's begin with the facts of the case. This case came before the court in 1962, and before that time, the New York Board of Regents had composed a non-denominational prayer to be recited by school children after saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And the prayer, just 22 words in length, went something like this. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon thee, and we beg thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Now, as far as prayers go, that one's pretty vague. Like, ain't nobody invoking Jesus or Allah in that prayer. And what's more, children could opt out of that prayer with written permission from their parents. Even so, a group of parents led by Stephen Engel challenged the practice. And why did they do that? Well, for that, let's consider the constitutional principle at stake. For Engel and his crew, this prayer was a violation of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which, in case you forgot, says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, if you're paying attention, and I know that you are, you might be saying, wait, what? Congress isn't even involved here. This
is Heimler history.
was a New York state law, so how could Engel claim that this law was violating his First Amendment rights, which protect citizens from the federal government? And if that's your question, then let me hasten to remind you of the 14th Amendment, which says, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States." So the 14th Amendment essentially applies the First Amendment to the states as well as to the federal government. But don't get confused by all the amendments. At the end of the day, this is a case about the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Okay, so what was the decision? Well, the question that the court considered was this: does the reading of a state-sponsored prayer at the beginning of school violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment? And their answer in a 6-1 decision was yes. The prayer did in fact violate the First Amendment. It was Justice Hugo Black who wrote the majority opinion, and in it he said, "The First Amendment was added to the Constitution to stand as a guarantee that neither the power nor the prestige of the federal government would be used to control, support, or influence the kinds of prayer the American people can say." Now, Justice Potter Stewart was the one justice who dissented, and his reasoning was that the practice of school prayer was constitutional because it gave children, quote, "the opportunity of sharing in the spiritual heritage of our nation." Additionally, Stewart argued that the government isn't establishing a religion just by offering a prayer for those who want to pray. However, it was Thomas Jefferson's famous wall of separation between church and state that won the day in this case. All right, now let's talk about why this case matters. First of all, the Engel decision was a demonstration of how the court ruled in favor of individual liberties. Remember, in First Amendment cases, the court is always trying to strike a balance between social order and individual liberty, and in this case, they went with the latter. Second, this case matters because it established the groundwork for many subsequent cases regarding schools and religious activities. For example, Engel was cited in the Wallace v. Jaffrey case in 1985, which struck down an Alabama law that provided for a minute of silence at the beginning of the school day. And in 1992, it was also the basis for declaring clergy-led prayer at a middle school graduation ceremony unconstitutional. And there are several other cases I could mention, but the point is, Engel v. Vitale was a very important case that had implications for the relationship between government and religion for decades to come.
Okay, not what I wanted. So, the reason why this inflamed Christian nationalism is because it reinforced their victim complex that our founders were Christian and people are trying to hide that and take it away. People viewed this as oppressive because when you've been trained to believe that the founders embedded Christianity into our founding documents, into the Constitution, this is crazy to you, even though you and I know that this is exactly what the Constitution says and not surprising at all. This is Abington versus Schempp. Pretty similar.
In 1962, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Engel versus Vitale that state-compelled prayer in public schools violated the Establishment Clause, which prohibits the government from adopting a religion or mandating religious practices. Prayer, scripture reading, and religious instruction were commonplace in public schools, and it remained unclear what other activities might be prohibited. In School District of Abington Township versus Schempp, the court created a test to clarify when state-sponsored activities violated the Establishment Clause. A Pennsylvania statute required public schools to begin each day by reading Bible verses and a recitation of the Lord's Prayer. Student participation was voluntary.
Still don't like it.
A similar rule, imposed by the Baltimore School District pursuant to Maryland state law, required morning exercises in public schools consisting of a Bible reading or a recitation of the Lord's Prayer. Students could be excused from participation by parental request. The father of a public school student in Pennsylvania sought an injunction against the statute. The district court struck down the law as a violation of the Establishment Clause. The mother of a Baltimore public school student filed a petition for a writ of mandamus to rescind the rule. The trial court upheld the rule as constitutional because student attendance wasn't compulsory. The Maryland Court of Appeals affirmed. The United States Supreme Court consolidated the two cases and granted certiorari.
So, yeah, basically you can't do prayer in public schools as a leader. What I've always been told is that if a kid leads a prayer, it's fine. It's just staff members that can't lead prayer. A lot of my students are very religious, so occasionally that has happened where they ask me, can we pray? And I say, you can. You guys can. What killed me one time is when they had a group prayer before the test, and then the average, I think, was a 52. I was like, maybe we should have done a group study session. Just a thought. Not to disrespect anybody's religion, but it was interesting. It was an interesting day. So those two Kate courses were used by Christian nationalist leaders, in the Cross and the Flame articles in the magazines and stuff like that, to inflame their base. And their main tactic was, see, the government is oppressing our religion. The government's trying to take away our religion. The government is trying to harm us. That was their whole talking point. We're back to that same article again. We'll be with it a while. This combination of access and ammunition helped shape the movement. Before this ruling, there was an energy that built up into the 60s, but part of what the Christian nationalist political movement was up against was the historical reticence of Christians to be open about their politics. Reticence is a state or habit of being reserved, unwilling to speak freely. So I guess because they were like demure. Kotler said there was a sort of separation from church and state, and it's like, well, we have our religious beliefs, we care about it, but I'm not going to go campaign and talk about people with my faith or my church. People very much went to church, it was a part of their life, but it was like their church community, and it kind of stayed there and in their homes. They weren't like in the streets, I guess is what they're trying to say. But after the prayer in school rulings, people were like, no, I want to talk about this. I want my religion out there. Although people were outraged over the school prayer rulings for a number of reasons, a segment of opposition was very clearly anti-Semitic, especially against the Anti-Defamation League and the American Civil Liberties Union. Because the Anti-Defamation League, which is a group that is really, their focus is against anti-Semitism. They were like, we don't want prayer in school, so it really started targeting other religious groups because of the prayer and school rules changing, and the ACLU. They hate the ACLU. The rulings fed into Smith's anti-Semitic rhetoric and bolstered the Christian nationalist appeal to extremists looking for a scapegoat. That anti-Semitism fits well into the platform of Christian nationalism because hate is critical to upkeep a white Christian society. So anti-Semitism is very much baked in this. In little ways, you start to see it come out. So this is a Gerald L.K. Smith, the grandfather of Christian nationalism, just looking so horrible. Yeah. Ugh. So this trend continued into the 1970s, and religion became a force that was not to be kept to oneself, but that legitimized one's voice in politics. This is when we start to see it go from like the congregation out into the world. This energy was capitalized in the 1980s with the rise of Reverend Jerry Falwell's Moral Majority and the TV preacher Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition, along with many other TV preachers as well. So now we're going to sidetrack and talk about the Moral Majority. So Reverend Jerry Falwell's Moral Majority. The origins can be traced to 1976 when he embarked on a series of I Love America rallies across the country to raise awareness of social issues that were important to him. These rallies were an extension of his decision to go against the traditional Baptist principle of separating religion and politics, and a change of heart Falwell says he had when he perceived as what he described as a decay of the nation's morality. Keep in mind, 1976, this is right after integration. Race is very much entrenched in this as well. We'll touch on it a little bit, but you'll really see it in like the undertones. Through hosting these rallies, he was able to gauge national support for a formal organization and raise his profile as a leader. Having already been a part of a well-established network of ministers and ministries, within a few years, Falwell was favorably positioned to launch the Moral Majority. The impetus for the Moral Majority was the struggle for control of an American conservative Christian advocacy group known as Christian Voice during 1978. Robert Grant, Christian Voice president, said that in a news conference that the religious right was a sham controlled by 3 Catholics and a Jew. Following this, Paul Weyrich, Terry Dolan, and Richard Vergereau, the Catholics, and Howard Phillips, the Jewish man, left Christian Voice. So Christian Voice is dead, I guess. That's what I was saying, like the groups, they change names, people fight, people get fired, but the Christian nationalism, like, carries through. During a 1979 meeting, they urged televangelist Jerry Falwell to found the Moral Majority, a phrase coined by Weyrich. So one of the guys that was in the Christian Voice. This was the period in which the new Christian right arose. Joining Falwell in the Moral Majority was Ed McGator, who the same year founded the Religious Roundtable in Memphis, Tennessee. Falwell also brought in Tim Leahy, a leader of clergy group opposed to gay rights, and a John Birch Society figure as an organizer. I know a little bit about the John Birch Society. If you watched my stream on Phyllis Schlafly, I think it comes up in there. I think. They kept having to rebrand because people would start to see through their BS, truly. So Falwell and Wyridge founded the Moral Majority in 1979. I forgot to delete so many of the little citation links. Sorry about that. According to the former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who was a Texas evangelist James Robertson's communication director at the time, Roberson's religious freedom rally at the Dallas Convention Center was the genesis of the Moral Majority. It was a predominantly Southern-oriented organization of the Christian right, although its state chapters and political activity extended beyond the South. The number of state chapters grew quickly, with organizations in 18 states by 1980. The variety of resources available to the Moral Majority at its founding facilitated the rapid expansion. So I think they had like TV, books, like they had tons of fucking shit. They were going to churches, they had a ton of stuff. So like, again, it seems like it's about money and power. That's what we keep going back to, is it's like, it seems like Christian nationalism is a way to incite people into giving certain people money and power. It all comes back to money and power. And if you wanted to have money and power, maybe you should have joined an MLM instead. It probably would have been less harmful. Where was I? So, Moral Majority surpassed Christian Voice in its size and influence. This is some 1980s news story about the Moral Majority. This is the caption. Some of the issues they champion are questionable. We're not going to watch the whole thing because it's really long. Oh, no,
Moral Majority endorses the flag, the family, and the freedom of speech. But to avoid endangering the group's tax-exempt status, neither national founder Jerry Falwell nor state chairman Jim Vineyard officially endorse candidates.
Tax-free, baby, because it's a religious organization.
We don't tell people how to vote. We tell them what the issues are.
As far as Moral Majority leaders are concerned, the issues this election year include abortion, the Equal Rights Amendment, gay rights, and the Panama Canal Treaty. All of
Does anything change except the Panama Canal Treaty? And not really. We were just fighting about that again, too.
Of which they oppose. And capital punishment, prayer in schools, increased military spending, and reinstatement of the military draft for men, all of which they advocate. Critics complain that some of those issues have nothing to do with morality.
Efforts of that kind, to some degree, tend to sort of cheapen religion.
I believe in separation of church and state, but I don't think you can separate God from America.
The separation of church and state is a principle any group, anywhere on the political spectrum can use to its own advantage. Tomorrow we'll present the arguments raging in this election year over how that principle should be applied.
Yeah, so there's like an hour-long version of that, which I thought this was. But that is people talking about them in the 80s, just so you can kind of see their vibe. They were headquartered in Lynchburg, Virginia, fitting, where Falwell was the presiding minister of the nation's largest independent Baptist church, Thomas Road Baptist Church. Virginia had been in a seat of Christian right politics, being the state where the Christian Coalition's headquarters were established. I think I'm kind of over this. I think you get it. They were incorporated into the Liberty Federation in 1985. So again, they rebrand. Like every couple years, they rebrand. Some of the people stay the same. Some of the people leave. They claim that at their height, they had 4 million members and 2 million donors, about 20 different states. Washington State was the largest. They changed organization titles. They did start to get involved in political activity in a number of ways. They were aimed at supporting legislation on school prayer, but before long, they became heavily invested in presidential elections and national politics. They also mobilized delegates in Virginia to the Virginia Republican State Nominating Convention to support Guy Farley, an evangelical candidate for lieutenant governor. And nationally, they encouraged electoral participation among their members and used registration drives to register churchgoers to vote. So, yeah, they don't have to pay taxes, but they're having voter registration drives at church, for sure. With the logic that moral majority members would be likely to vote for moral majority endorsed candidates. They did end up endorsing candidates later on, thus strengthening the organization's electoral efficacy and strengthening its endorsements. Leaders within the moral majority asked ministers to give their congregants political direction and remind them when to vote and who to vote for, and why the moral majority held particular positions on certain issues, like we saw in that video: abortion, military, those kind of things. The moral majority is probably best known for its involvement in the presidential elections, specifically of Ronald Reagan. So the 1976 election of Jimmy Carter marked a milestone for evangelical Christians. For the first time, a self-professed evangelical Christian had been elected but they didn't really fuck with him. They didn't like a lot of his policies, and he did not share their imperative to unify personal and political positions. Jimmy Carter was like a believer in separation of church and state. He did not actively oppose their Carter did not actively oppose the pro-choice platform, nor did he try and bridge the church-state divide, because again, he, in my opinion, had like morals and believed in a separation of church and state. So he didn't really say that much about abortion. And so instead of supporting Jimmy Carter, they supported Ronald Reagan. So this is more proof that it was never about God. It was about power and money. Because this guy that's the same religion as you like fucking hate him because he believes in separation of church and state. The moral majority was a relatively early supporter of Reagan, endorsing him before the Republican convention did. According to Jimmy Carter, that autumn 1980, a group headed by Jerry Falwell purchased $10 million in commercials on Southern radio and TV to brand me as a traitor to the South and no longer a Christian. So, like, they're very much involved in campaigning. They're very much involved in the media. Like, it's a lot. After Reagan's victory, Falwell attributed Reagan's success directly to the moral majority and others registering and encouraging churchgoers to vote who had never been politically active. Empirical evidence suggests that Falwell's claims about the role of the Christian right organizations in Reagan's victory has some truth, although it's difficult to determine definitively. So Reagan sought input from the moral majority many times during his leadership, during his campaign. He appointed Reverend Robert Billings, the moral majority's first executive director, to be a religious advisor to the campaign. He also appointed Billings to a position in the Department of Education. How the fuck is a reverend qualified to be leading the Department of Education? This appointment was particularly significant for the moral majority because they had a lot of important issues regarding private schools. This is also shortly after schools got integrated. See, this is like 1970s when integration was really happening, because I know the law was 1954, but it took a really long time. It's still not done a lot of places. So a lot of these people wanted to be able to put their kids in private schools. They wanted more private schools. They wanted money for private schools. They wanted to be able to keep their schools white. So very much race is like an undertone in Christian nationalism that's used. So they supported his re-election in 1984. Some people suggested that they might have actually had a negative effect on his campaign, but their role had changed. So, because a lot of anti-moral majority voters voted for Walter Mondale. This is when people started to like become a little bit aware of them and be like, whoa, what the fuck's going on there? 1988 was the last presidential election for which the moral majority was an active organization. Reagan was at his 2-term limit by now. So they gave the endorsement to George H.W. Bush. And Falwell's decision highlighted the rivalry between Falwell and Robertson as televangelists, like TV preachers. So they're having some infighting. Race is an overtone, I fear. I meant an undertone of that text, but very much an overtone of their stances. So they shortly became dissolved, but this is what they said. Our goal has been achieved. The religious right is solidly in place, and religious conservatives are in America are now in for the duration. So that's fucking creepy. That's very spooky. I don't love that. Yikes. So they're not being like, oh, we were wrong, it's done. They're like, check, moving on. And I think that that's part of why they rename and change every couple of years, is to make it harder to track. Because this was fucking hard to track, I'll tell you that much. So a little more on their organization and their history. Here's some of their stances: promotion of traditional family values, opposition to media outlets accused of promoting anti-family agenda, opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. So this is why this came up in my Stop ERA stream, which was a while ago, but it's still up there, and the strategic arms limitation talks, opposition to state recognition or acceptance of homosexual acts, because some states were starting to like decriminalize homosexual activity, which is what they called it back then. Prohibition of abortion, including cases involving incest or rape, support of Christian players in school, proselytizing Jewish people and non-Christians for conversion to Christianity. Evil villains, but everything is so stupid. It really is. They became successful at campaigning to create an integrated social platform that would appeal, not integrated race, like integrated meaning multiple things at once, that would appeal to most Christians by packaging a variety of previously disparate issues under the banner of traditional family values. This is abortion, divorce, feminism, gay and lesbian rights, equal rights amendment, all of that. It just got rebranded as traditional family values. Don't you want your traditional family values? Scary. They also campaigned for the inclusion of prayer in schools and tax incentives for married couples as a protection for the traditional family structure. Under this pro-family agenda, they mobilized a large base of supporters with issue-centric dialogue that they proliferated in their network of preachers and mailings. By this point, they're fucking organized. They have mailing lists, they have churches, they have TV preachers. Like, they are out there, they are organized because they've been around forever. I was saying to my conservative dad, I'm surprised there's none of this going on with gambling nowadays, but also makes sense. So let's talk about the Christian Coalition. Where this started, we said that there was the moral majority and the Christian Coalition. So that was moral majority. Moving on to Christian Coalition. So Marion Gordon Pat Robertson was an American media mogul, evangelist, and political commentator, presidential candidate, and charismatic minister. He advocated a Christian conservative ideology and was known for his involvement in the Republican Party. He's associated with the charismatic movement within the Protestant evangelicalism. He served as the head of Regent University and of the Christian Broadcasting Network. His career spanned over 5 decades. He was the founder of several organizations that all seem like the same fucking thing to me. The 700 Club, Christian News, Freeform, which is and a TV program that was broadcast on Freeform, which is formerly ABC Family, from the Christian Broadcast Network. Like, he was doing a fucking lot. He was the son of a senator. He was a Southern Baptist, and he was active as an ordained minister with that denomination for many years. But he held to charismatic theology, non-traditionally common among Southern Baptists. He unsuccessfully campaigned to become the Republican nominee in 1988. As a result of seeking political office, he never again served in any official role for the church, but he was still on TV doing religious shit. He remained a controversial figure, especially known for evangelical religiocentrism, while he became recognized and an influential public voice for conservative Christianity around the U.S. and the world. His opposition to various progressive causes, including LGBTQ rights, feminism, and the right to an abortion, was frequently criticized. Did it go? In 1956, he met with Dutch missionary Cornelius van der Breggen, who impressed Robertson both with his lifestyle and message. They quoted Proverbs, blah, blah, blah. He made the Christian Broadcasting Network. He endorsed the evangelicals and Catholics together. This is when they start fucking with Catholics. For a long time, they didn't fuck with the Catholics. But then their numbers were down, and they were like, now we like Catholics. And it was really abortion shit. They were like, we want to get shit done with abortion, so get on in here, Catholics. We heard y'all don't like that either. Which, like, Catholics, did y'all just fold like a fucking picnic table? These people hated you for decades, and now you're just with them? So he was very, very rich. So lucrative, Robertson spun the Family Channel as a commercial entity and sold it for $1.9 billion in 1997. It's really about money. Like, that's what I'm seeing here, is it's about money. If you don't know what the 700 Club is, this is what it is. This is the hour that we're not going to watch.
Christians were mocked and insulted 28 times on primetime TV last year. Thank you and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special series on the 700 Club. We call it The Rising Storm. In America today,
28 is such a low
by
number.
the media is becoming more and more popular.
We can do better.
This systematic ridicule of the religious beliefs of the evangelical Christians and the Roman Catholics bears a disturbing resemblance to the campaign of lies perpetrated by the Nazis against the Jews.
Y'all were the Nazis! You guys were the Nazis! The modern founder of Christian nationalism tried to hang out with Hitler, and Hitler didn't fuck with him. God!
There's a thunderous clap right now in this nation warning us of the rising storm about to strike. A storm that could make history repeating itself again. Dale Herb files this report on the Nazi parallel.
An effective anti-Semitic film the Nazis ever made. It is entitled The Eternal Jew. It epitomized Hitler's big lie by depicting Jews as filth, no better than rats that breed and live in back alleys. The film helped to condition a civilized, cultured European nation like Germany to accept the annihilation.
So what they're doing is showing Nazi propaganda and be like, that's happening to us. Except 50 years ago, they were doing Nazi propaganda. So you kind of lost me there.
Of the Jews. It was part of the carefully orchestrated strategy of Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels.
Goebbels was very systematic, and he knew exactly how he wanted to do it. He wanted to dehumanize the Jews.
So yeah, they basically just say incorrect stuff and get people to believe it. Let's skip ahead to something else.
Judges, and the shift of this thing, it wouldn't happen overnight, but it can be done. And either we get involved now while we...
I'm gonna run it back a little bit.
Office, the city councilmen get voted out of office if they won't stand up.
Okay,
for the
now they're
rights of
talking
the
about
unborn.
voting.
Just got to be. Ladies and gentlemen, I am absolutely persuaded, and I have a good deal of experience in this field, that if the pro-family Roman Catholics and the evangelical Christians of America and the pro-family members of the Greek Orthodox Church and the pro-family conservative Protestants would get together on the basic issues dealing with the family, dealing with this nation.
So you guys see their vibe now. It's no longer like the specific special type of Christian. They're like, get in here, get in here. Because again, it was never about God and Christianity or Puritan or like pureness. It was about money and power. That's what it always was. This is a more recent Pat Robertson. This is in 2014. Thankfully, he is dead now, but he was alive.
Okay, this is David who says, we
I don't
have
mean to
friends
laugh,
who do
but
not
this is a little
celebrate
funny.
Christmas because they say December 25th is really a pagan holiday. While I agree that Jesus may not have been born on December 25th, he certainly was born as described in the Bible. How do I respond to them?
Well, in a sense, tell them they're right. You see, the winter solstice a couple of days later was the shortest day of the year, and the pagans had something called Saturnalia. And it was a time of lawlessness because all the laws were suspended. And people, a bunch of singers who actually wandered the streets naked singing. And then they had orgies, sexual orgies. It was a mass thing. Well,
sounds great.
When the Catholic Church came along in Italy, the Romans and others didn't want to give up their holidays. So they said, okay, we'll Christianize it. And so they said, okay, we'll say the birth of Jesus was the 25th of December. And then there was a monk who began to add it up. You see, if you read in Luke, it says there's a census taken when Quirinius was governor and so forth and so on. And
bring back OG Christmas. Next time I get wasted and take my top off at Christmas, I don't want to hear about it from fucking anybody because I am celebrating Christmas in the traditional way, the original pagan Christmas, and it's my cultural choice to celebrate Christmas in that way.
And figure the exact time dating from the foundation of Rome. And that's when the dates were established. And
so you get it. This fucking guy. You know who he kind of reminds me of? If you were here for my Nathan Fielder stream that most of you hated, that guy from the rehearsal that was driving and he was like, whoa, I'm going 30 miles an hour. There's 30 planets. Like, that's what this sounds like to me. They're the same to me. I know they're different, but to me they're the same. Oh, the Overton window is the name of the window that shifts from your perspective. Really cool. Highly recommend looking into it. I gave you a very quick example, but it's very interesting. So at this point, TV preachers are becoming very, 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 very important. The moral majority, the Christian coalition, all of that. So they started really going for a lot of specific things, some of which we've already talked about, going against the women's movement, the gay movement, legalized abortion. They lobbied for prayer in public schools. They also wanted to increase defense spending. They had a strong anti-communist foreign policy and continued support of Israel. You might be confused because you're like, I thought that this was founded in anti-Semitism. We will get there. So this is a new generation of Christian fundamentalists and Christian nationalists, the Christian right, that are going beyond simply denouncing cultural trends, and they are going into the political arena. The organization grew to several million members. They elected Ronald Reagan, like we said. Reagan's fusion of evangelicalism with American exceptionalism further cemented the union between evangelicals and the Republican Party. So this is TV preachers of the time, just so you can get the vibes.
We propelled, birds propel, eagles don't propel. We said, oh God, 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 oh God.
What fools the nations are to rage against the Lord.
You know, what's fascinating about it is it's just hair, and everybody wants to talk about my hair.
But see, Jan found a scripture in the Old Testament, and in the Living Bible it says that white hair is the crowning glory and is seen most amongst the godly. That is in the scripture.
Now that's something, isn't it?
Yeah.
The apostles were businessmen. They were rich men, had plenty of money. I'm going to show you that Jesus was a wealthy man, had plenty of money. And see, all of that completely foreign to us from a traditional point of view.
Jesus was famously not a wealthy man. That was kind of part of his whole thing.
Riches. Blessed him with silver and gold. How many of you like silver and gold? Those of you that don't, you're in the wrong church.
Money, money, money. What is this?
There will be 50 people give $1,000, and do it right now, or I am finished.
Okay, you can be finished. That's fine.
And if you'll call during this telecast, for you that's
anointing oil from the Holy Land.
Just call the number on your screen. We'll rush this out to you. Many of you during this time of year need to anoint your billfold with this oil for a
The Pentecostal trauma is very much being felt right now. Yeah, I don't know shit about this. Sorry to what y'all experienced.
And
okay, so you get the point. This is what everyone's being exposed to at this time. So far, I'm gathering that almost all of this is about money and not even religion. And I would have hoped that these weirdos were at least in religious psychosis. And I'm be like, yeah, you're acting crazy. You're in religious psychosis. But it seems like the key people in charge are not in religious psychosis. They're just inciting it in their followers, which I think is particularly evil and weird. So if this was founded as an anti-Semitic movement, why do they support Israel? What's going on there? They're very intertwined and connected. And this is the part where I started to feel like I sound a little crazy. So bear with me, and I promise I'm going to explain it good. And I want to give a general, again, reminder that criticism of Israel is different than being derogatory towards Jewish people. I'm criticizing a government, not a faith. Israel is new. Judaism is very old. Just wanted to remind everyone of that. And as always, give the reminder, there is a genocide happening in Palestine at the hands of Israel that very much needs to be talked about. Not necessarily in this stream of Christian nationalism, but low-key, yeah. And it kind of does come up as you see. So anyway, we're going to go back to 1888, just to give you a little bit of context of Israel's land and what was there and all of that. So the blue is the British Empire, the red is the Ottoman Empire. In World War I, British Empire took over this area and owned it throughout World War I and II. So following World War II, this was the UN Resolution 181. I am not an expert in this. I'm just reading off a map, so if I don't explain it perfectly, I apologize. So it was the British Empire, and you can see they basically divided it into different zones, like mandatory Palestine Jewish, mandatory Palestine Arab, Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the UN, and then you can see Jordan and Egypt off to the side there. Then 1948, was when the Arab-Israel War happened, and Israel was firmly established, partially by the UN, but in 1948, the following year, Israel was established, and you can see Jordan and kind of was in there, but then later they turned that into Gaza and the West Bank, which is considered occupied territory. That was in the 1960s and 70s. So you can see Palestinian land is very much getting smaller, like tiny little dots. That's even since this map has been encroached on further. So that's kind of a very, 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 very short summary, just to give you context of like what's happening with Israel, when did it start, where did it start, all of that, just like the extreme basics. So when and why was Israel founded? Israel was created as an independent state in 1948 by David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, following a United Nations plan to partition mandatory Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. The creation of Israel was driven by the Zionist movement's goal to establish a national home for the Jewish people. This goal gained urgency after the Holocaust. Zionism existed before that, but Zionism really became like mainstream after the Holocaust because, 6 million Jewish people were horrifically murdered. So I'm hoping I didn't have to draw that connection for you, but I did. Britain, which had controlled Palestine since World War I, withdrew, and subsequent invasion by Arab armies led to conflict and the displacement of many Palestinian Arabs in an event known as Nakba. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. So on May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, who was the head of the Jewish Agency, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel, and President Harry Truman recognized the new nation on that same day. Although the United States has supported the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which favored the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine, President FDR had assured the Arabs in 1945 that the United States would not intervene without consulting both the Jews and Arabs in that region. The British, who held a colonial mandate for Palestine until May 1948, opposed the creation of a Jewish state and an Arab state in Palestine, as well as unlimited immigration of Jewish refugees to the region, because naturally a lot of Jewish people following the war were refugees, so that had been held in camps, been in hiding, whatever. It's a war. There's tons of refugees. Also very understandable. Great Britain wanted to preserve good relations with the Arabs to protect its vital political and economic interest in Palestine. Money. Money, 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 money. I'm Palestinian and randomly came across this. I'm so pleasantly surprised. LMAO, keep doing you, Queen. Thank you. Soon after President Truman took office, he appointed several experts to study the Palestinian issue. In the summer of 1946, Truman established a special cabinet committee under the chairmanship of Dr. Henry F. Grady, an Assistant Secretary of State. Is that the Grady of Atlanta? I don't know. Who entered the negotiations with a parallel British committee to discuss the future of Palestine. Did they want to invite Palestinian people? Or? In May 1946, Truman announced his approval of the recommendation to admit 100,000 displaced persons into Palestine, and in October publicly declared the support for creation of a Jewish state. Throughout 1947, the United Nations Special Commission on Palestine examined the Palestinian question and recommended a portion of Palestine into a Jewish and an Arab state. On November 29th, 1947, the United... Ooh, sorry, I dropped a fidget spinner, if that scared you. On November 29th, 1947, the United Nations adopted Resolution 181, also known as the Partition Resolution, that would divide Great Britain's former Palestinian mandate into Jewish and Arab states in May 1948, when the British mandate was scheduled to end. Under the resolution, the area of religious significance surrounding Jerusalem would remain as a corpus separatum under international control administered by the United Nations. That is what you saw here. UN plan. You see? So, although the United States backed the Resolution 181, the U.S. Department of State recommended that the creation of the United Nations trusteeships with limits on Jewish immigration and a division of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab provinces, but not states. The State Department, concerned about the possibility of increasing the Soviet role in the Arab world and the potential for restriction by Arab oil-producing nations of oil supplies to the United States, advised against U.S. intervention. So, again, a lot of it goes back to money and power and land and the things that we see throughout human history. Not the oil lobby. Where was I? And advised the U.S. against intervention on behalf of the Jewish people. For some reason, Jews, it just sounds derogatory to me. I know it's not, but just when it's written, it just feels like a little curt way of saying, I just feel like Jewish people. People is just generally a good term to use. Later, as the date for British departure from Palestine drew near, the Department of State grew concerned about the possibility of an all-out war in Palestine as Arab states threatened to attack almost as soon as the UN passed the Partition Resolution. Despite growing conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jewish people, And despite the Department of State's endorsement of a trusteeship, Truman ultimately decided to recognize the state of Israel. So there was conflict around this in the beginning. They were talking about power in the beginning. They were talking about money in the beginning. They were talking about immigration in the beginning. They were talking about oil in the beginning. This is when I finally understood I'm a product of propaganda and the U.S. was not the good guys. Wait, you right now? In this moment? That's kind of like an honor to me, thanks. So Christian nationalism was founded on anti-Semitic movement, so why do they support Israel? I wanted to give you the context of how Israel was created. And again, Christian nationalism is much, much older than the modern state of Israel. While most may not immediately associate Christian evangelicalism with the state of Israel, a Jewish state since its 1948 founding, the unique views of American evangelicals help underpin the U.S.-Israel bilateral relationship. So like you saw, the U.S. was like very connected to Israel from the jump. The U.S. was involved in the creation. The U.S. was involved in the debate of what to do in that area. They've been very intertwined from day one. So many evangelicals maintain that the continued existence of Israel is key to their understanding of the end times. This is what's important to me. This is when I felt like light bulbs going on, and I was like, I'm understanding. Like I'm starting to understand the world around me and understand how we got here. So they believe in the book of Revelations. They believed that Jewish people must possess their own country in the Holy Land of Israel before the second coming of Jesus can occur, and that is their ultimate goal. Does that make sense now? This was like to me when I figured it out as someone who wasn't raised religious. With the establishment of a Christly kingdom on earth, these distinctive religious beliefs lead to significant differences in evangelicals' views of Israel compared to other Americans. For one, evangelicals are far more likely to believe that Israel's existence is the result of divine intervention or favor. According to a compilation of two 2013 polls by Pew Research, the percentage of white evangelical Christians that say Israel was given to the Jewish people by God is on par with the percentage of ultra-Orthodox Jews who say the same. So that's why these two groups that you would think have nothing in common actually very, very, very much have things in common here. So by comparison, 44% of overall Americans believe that, and 55% of Christians believe that. So again, the belief we're talking about here is that Israel was given to the Jewish people by God. Orthodox Jewish people believe that at the same rate as white evangelical Christians. That is so fascinating to me. So evangelicals' unique view of Israel also affects their view of a U.S. policy decision. For example, in 2018, the United States under Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But remember, Jerusalem was originally supposed to be the UN-controlled Holy Land because many, many religions all have like holy stuff going on there. Again, ignorant person. They believe that the modern-day Israel is the same as the Old Testament biblical Israel. I can't even get into that because, like I said, I don't really understand the Bible. This decision was widely controversial because it indicated that Washington was effectively acknowledging Jerusalem as the capital of Israel over Tel Aviv, overriding more than 70 years of international agreements and thousands of years of earlier stuff. So this is kind of a graph showing what I already showed you earlier, the was Israel given to the Jewish people by God question among different groups. White evangelicals, and a lot of this data is kind of old. This is like over a year old. White evangelicals are also far more likely to say that the United States is not aiding Israel enough. 1/3 of evangelicals believe that Washington is not providing enough support to Israel compared to 20% of the overall population. So this is another graph. The pink is white Protestant evangelicals. Israel is defending its interest and the military actions are justified. Super high. Israel has gone too far and his military actions are not justified. Super low. Not sure. A little more in the middle there. So Christian nationalism in Israel. Christian nationalism's connection to Israel is primarily rooted in Christian Zionism, an ideology that views the modern state of Israel as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and a precursor to the second coming of Jesus. While the two are distinct concepts, they often overlap and mutually reinforce one another. This alignment has significant implications for U.S. politics and foreign policy regarding Israel. while also generating controversy among Jewish and non-evangelical Christian communities. So one is the blessing for Christians. This theology is often linked to the belief based on Genesis 12:3 that those who bless Israel will be blessed by God. This provides divine incentive for adherents to offer unconditional support of Israel regardless of its political actions. This is all like, it was coming together so fascinatingly to me. Getting this information from someone who has no religious background / context is so fascinating. That's why I felt like, even though I'm kind of ignorant, I was a good person to talk about this with, because I felt like I was coming into it without a religious bias. I have my own biases about my beliefs in human rights and stuff. I'm biased towards human rights, kill me. But I'm not coming into it with like biblical beliefs that were like jading how I was interpreting things. Apocalyptic motivation. Support for Israel is often not primarily based in respect for Judaism, but often a desire to hasten the second coming of Christ. This view can be seen as instrumentalizing the Jews, casting them as instruments of a prophecy rather than as an autonomous people. This has always been what I was confused about, because they're like, oh yeah, the Jewish people have to go there. And that didn't really feel like it was giving much empowerment or choice to people who are Jewish to like determine their own belief and destiny. I always felt weird about that as an outsider looking in. Shared exceptionalism. Both Christian nationalists and Christian Zionists often hold a view of their respective nations as divinely chosen or exceptional. So the same way they kind of view like America, God's founding documents, those same beliefs are present in their views about Israel as well. Christian nationalists believe the divine favor rests on America, while Christian Zionists believe it rests on modern Israel, which is why these groups are very much intertwined. Agreed. I'm so used to having people who have left evangelicalism talking about this. Hearing this from someone who wasn't around that indoctrination is fascinating. It's scary to think that there's many people cheering on the earth's demise because they believe it's fulfilling a prophecy that ends with them in paradise. These people are taking the Bible literally, and it's exhausting. So the anti-Semites, in my opinion, seem like they're kind of exploiting the Jewish people. Like they're like, you guys have to go to Israel so that Jesus can come back. I saw two different beliefs about this. Some things I read said that the Christian nationalists think that everyone's going to die. Like they're like, yeah, the Jewish people go back to Israel, everyone dies, and then we go to heaven. Some other things I read said that the Christian nationalists believe that when the Jewish people go to Israel, they'll convert. So I'm a little confused about why the Jewish people are on board with this. Like, I'm genuinely, if someone has an answer, let me know. Because I'm dead ass, like, again, I'm not religious, but I'm trying to, like, put myself in the shoes of a Jewish person, and someone being like, yeah, we think that you should live there so that you'll die, and then Jesus will come take me to heaven. That, like, doesn't really scream, I want to be your friend to me. I don't know if they just have, like, an agree to disagree thing going on. I don't know if, like, the Christian nationalists are like, we want you guys to be there for our reasons, and then the Zionists are like, who live in Israel are like, we want to be there for our reasons, but both of us want us here, so, like, that's good. I don't really know. They think they want to be in the Holy Land, which they think is Israel. Maybe, like, if I can have mine, you can have yours, but religious nations, I think it's that. I think it's, like, maybe they just don't talk about it. Like, maybe they're just like, yeah, we need to be in Israel. Let's focus on that. Israel needs to be here. We need to be in charge of it. Let's focus on that. It's very Manifest Destiny vibes. So we're going back to that original article. I told you we were going to be there pretty much all night. It's our anchor. So that is kind of about the creation of Israel, how these groups became intertwined together. Going back to Ronald Reagan, Ronald Reagan actively courted these forces. When I asked Kotler about the changes he's seen since the 1970s, he was particularly concerned about the way that Christian nationalists wield religion as a weapon. To me, one of the troubling innovations that has happened is using the language of religious freedom and defining that as the freedom to discriminate in the name of your religion. That's where we're going here. Symbiosis. Perfect word. Thank you. Basically, the prophecy is that the Jewish people get the chance to convert at the time of Revelation. But even, I don't understand, are Jewish people down with that? Because I would think, and from like my friends who are Jewish, a lot of my friends who are Jewish are not Zionist, they're like very adamant in their faith. And the thought of being like, oh, you'll just convert, like that does not seem like something that would be super popular, widespread. It's something about igniting a holy war and Jesus returning and bringing about the end times, interpreted from Revelations, I think. Like, oh my God. This is so strange. He draws similarities between this language and that of Walter Huss, a pivotal figure of Oregon's far-right movement. Huss was an anti-Semite and a conspiracy theorist who, while he claimed not to hate individual Jews, he argued that Judaism was an existential threat to America and Christianity. So when he speaks about the truth about that, people call him a bigot. But if he says, I'm not a bigot, I'm speaking the truth, and Jewish people get mad because they can't handle the truth. They want me to shut up because I'm speaking the truth. Coulter says he sees the same thing happening concerning the LGBTQ plus community, observing, it's just like when people say that to discriminate against same-sex couples, it's because God tells us the truth about what proper sexuality is. God has told us what truths are, so we're just acting out truth. You call it bigotry, you call it discrimination, we call it expressing religious freedom. And that argument back to the 60s and 70s by most people was regarded as ludicrous. It's not the way that works, but it's come pretty much accepted as a part of our national discourse. I think the way a lot of these people think about it is that it's the job of the Supreme Court to protect the right of religious people to be bigots in the name of freedom, and that prioritizing freedom over the experience of people who've been subjected to historical forms of marginalization and oppression and so on. So what he's basically saying is we've kind of come to a place where instead of the Supreme Court protecting citizens from discrimination, the Supreme Court is protecting the right to discriminate in the name of God, which is not really the point. Did that go? So the fundamental problem with Christian nationalism is it's not just a political belief, but it puts anyone who opposes it into disagreement with God and religious freedom. And like we've talked about, it's rooted in hate and relies on discrimination by its design. So that was the end of that article. We're almost done. I know we've been here almost 2 hours. We're like, I think I have like 10 or 15 slides left. So I felt like that was a good overview of the basics and the origins that took us on some important sidetracks. We're going to end this with some more modern examples and growth of movement and data. So one that we've kind of talked about is the pro-life movement. In the United States, the movement that's associated with several Christian groups, especially the Catholic Church and evangelicals, and is often allied with the Republican Party, is the pro-life movement. This became organized during the late 1960s and 70s before Roe versus Wade, and then very much became a wide-scale anti-abortion movement after Roe versus Wade was passed. This is when the National Right to Life Committee was created. So pro-life, this is not just Christian nationalism, but they have made it a centerpiece of their movement. So before 1980, the Southern Baptist Convention officially advocated for loosening of abortion restrictions. During 1971 and 74, they were called upon to work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under such clear cases as rape, incest, or clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained as evidence of the likelihood to damage the emotional, mental, physical health of the mother. So all that to say, they have not cared about this forever. Abortion was politicized in very recent history. It was not a political issue for many years. W. Barry Garrett wrote in the Baptist Press, "Religious liberty, human equality, and justice advanced by the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. By 1980, conservative and Protestant leaders became vocal in their opposition to legalized abortion, and by the 1990s, Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition became significant anti-abortion organization." So they literally just pivoted. Again, money, power. In 2005, Richard Land, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, said that making abortion illegal is more important than any other issue. Let's talk about the Alliance Defending Freedom. I hate these fuckers. They have been identified as critics by critics like the Southern Poverty and Law Association and the Human Rights Campaign as the leading legal force for Christian nationalism in the United States. It's called the Alliance Defending Freedom. Their whole shtick is religious freedom for faith, for justice. I had to serve these fucking people. I know them. I was in the room where this happened. This was in either 2017 or 2018. I talked about this on TikTok a little bit today. They rented out the entire property. They did not drink and they did not tip us. All of them had 4+ children with them. Their wives looked miserable. And I spiraled and crashed out really bad because during one of their dinners, this was their dinner conversation, they pulled out this thing and it said the roadmap to outlaw abortion in America, and they were talking about how they were ahead of schedule. Their goal was to overturn Roe versus Wade by 2030. obviously it happened sooner. It was about trigger laws, local laws to make abortion access harder. They were like, we can legislate the hallway width of abortion clinics to take out specific spots. Like, they were so fucking organized. They talked about judge appointments, city councils, local elections. They talked about the eventual Supreme Court case to overturn Roe versus Wade. Like, it was very intense. A lot of the people at the Alliance Defending Freedom conference were very hesitant about Donald Trump. They didn't like that he was divorced. They did not like the beauty pageants. They did not like the cursing. They did not like the grab him by the pussy. They didn't like the sexualness of him. And the leader of the ADF, I don't know who he was actually, but he was giving a lot of speeches, so I assume he was in charge. He said that they just needed to focus on their key goals, and it was about a movement, not a candidate. And if the candidate was willing to further the movement, they needed to be forgiving of that. Mitch McConnell was supposed to come and talk, but I don't know if that ever happened because my manager could tell I was crashing out. So he made me do office work the rest of the time that they stayed there. But these people are very much doing their thing and out there for all those concerned. They were founded in 1993. Like I said, they really just changed the names and the logo. They're against trans people. They're against same-sex marriage. They have played a role in 74 Supreme Court decisions. They've directly represented 15 parties in Supreme Courts. They're headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona. They have branch offices in DC and New York. They have an international subsidiary in Vienna, Austria. They operate in over 100 countries. Mike Johnson works with them. He was elected Speaker of the House in 2023. Others have been associated with the ADF, including Amy Coney Barrett, Mike Pence, William Barr, Jeff Sessions, Joseph Hawley. And since the election of Donald Trump, they've become one of the most influential groups in informing the Trump administration, and they have been designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. So they're very much disturbing me. So their whole thing is about religion and public institutions. This is a graph to show their advocacy, religious liberty, opposition to abortion, and opposition to same-sex marriage, and then other. They have the belief that the framers' original intent for the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights as it reflects God's natural law and God's higher law. Like I said, they've been involved in many, many different Supreme Court cases. It's very common for them to pay lawyers. They have a ton of money. They have very big donors. This is that same TV money coming back into this. I cannot reiterate how much money these people have. Your buzzkill boss redacted, why are you spying on the guest from a bush? I was like, no reason. No reason at all. I think if I had been more educated about this back then, I could have come into this with a plan of okay, I'm going to record them. I'm going to send it to people. I think I could have come into this with a plan, but I was learning about it as I was seeing them. I was like, oh, Alliance Defending Freedom? That's weird. And I was like, they must have money to rent out this whole place because this hotel is $400 a night for one room, and they rented out all 400. It's a lot of money. And then I was just serving, and then I would hear them, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I would see their stuff, and I was like, what the fuck? And then I would Google them on my phone, and I was like, what the fuck? So I was learning about it in real time. So let's talk about January 6th. I think that's one of the last things we're going to talk about. So this is an article, New York Times from 2021. The Capitol insurrection was as Christian nationalist as it gets. We know this because of their signs and because of what we saw. I'm actually not really going to read this. It's kind of more stuff that I think you all already agree with. Sacred symbols during the insurrection, Christian flags, Jesus saves, giant crosses, prayers offered. Very much Christian nationalism is radiating through the January 6th movement. There is a book about it that they talk about in here. A conservative evangelical pastor, Greg Locke, the founder of Global Vision Bible Church, epitomizes the mindset Perry describes. In his September 2020 book, This Means War, Locke writes, "We are one election away from losing everything we hold dear. The battle," Locke continued, "is against everything evil and wicked around the world. It is a rallying of the troops of God's holy army. This is our day. This is our time. This means something for the kingdom. As a matter of fact, this means war." And on January 5th, the day before, he tweeted, "May the fire of the Holy Spirit fall upon Washington, D.C. today and tomorrow. May the Lamb of God be exalted. Let God arise and his enemies be brought low." So that's pretty obvious to me. So this article is really good, but it's super long, and we're already at 100 pages, so we're going to move on, or 100 slides, so we're going to move on. You guys get it. January 6th was like very Christian nationalist. So a lot of Christians see Trump as their savior. This is an article from November 2024. Trump declared, "Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason, and that reason was to save our country and restore America to greatness." This was a striking theme of the campaign, that he had been chosen by God, and some cast the election in an apocalyptic light and liken Trump to a biblical figure. Last year on the Christian show Flashpoint, TV evangelist Hank Kuhnman described a battle between good and evil. There's something on the president that the enemy fears. It's called the anointing. So they're also turning a political figure into a religious figure. Like, you see how the Christian nationalism is just like growing and changing. So why do people see him as like from God? So the son of Billy Graham, Franklin Graham, is one of the most famous preachers. He is one of Trump's believers. He's convinced that there's no doubt that the president-elect was chosen for this mission. That bullet went through his ear and missed his brain by a millimeter. His head turned at the last second. I believe God turned his head and saved his life. So many questions about his character, sexual misconduct, affairs, hush money, do not dim their view. Remember when Jesus told the crowd, "Let the one without sin cast the first stone," and slowly the entire audience began to disappear. All of us have sinned. So it's very much giving cult, and in the Bible they say something about false idols. I don't know what it is because I haven't read the Bible, but I know it's in there. So a part of the reason that people have looked past this is because Trump is like very agreed and like loyal to some of the Christian nationalist causes, especially the anti-abortion stuff, like I was saying with the ADF. Mr. Graham points to this evidence. He says, "This is a big win for Christians, for evangelicals. We believe the president will defend religious freedom where Democrats have not. The selection of Mike Huckabee as an ambassador to Israel is already a hint at the faith might shape some foreign policy. U.S. evangelicals, including Huckabee, are among the country's most fervent supporters of Israel." And then, like we said, many of them believe that Jewish people should populate the area of biblical Israel, including what is now the occupied West Bank and Gaza, in order to precipitate the events leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's what it all comes back to for them. In the early 1990s, 90% of U.S. adults identified as Christians. Now that is 64%. The biggest increase is not in any other religion. It's in those unaffiliated to any faith. And this is something Trump was able to draw upon. So again, that messaging of like, they're coming after you, your religion's going to be illegal, like all of that. Trump's message was, "I know you're in decline. I know your numbers are waning. I know your children and grandchildren aren't affiliated with your churches. But if you elect me, I'm going to restore power to the Christian churches." So not all Christians here were won over, but a lot of people, their faith did guide them to enjoy Donald Trump. So let's skip over some of this. It's kind of stuff that we already know. So let's finish off. This is the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll do our little game of doom. Some stats on Christian nationalism. In 2024, 3 in 10 Americans qualified as Christian nationalism adherents or sympathizers, compared with 2/3 who qualified as skeptics or rejectors. So it's not a majority of people. These percentages have remained stable since 2022. This is where I was saying we were going to end on a positive. This has not increased in the last 3 years. I think that is a good sign. The majority of Republicans qualify as either Christian nationalist adherents or sympathizers, compared to about 2 in 10 or fewer independents, and Democrats are even less. 2/3 of Americans who most trust far-right TV news sources are Christian nationalist, and it is positively associated with lower education levels and higher age, so uneducated old people. About half of those who attend religious services are Christian nationalist adherents or sympathizers. So an adherent is a firm believer, a sympathizer is like a half-ass believer. And most people that don't attend services do not believe these things. This is what I found interesting. The majority of white Americans who attend services qualify as Christian nationalists, with 54%, but it's 46% for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. That's why I was saying the beginning title shouldn't say white Christian nationalism, because it started as white, but now it's really growing, which tells me Not that this would be good, but it wasn't even necessarily rooted in hatred. To me, it's more rooted in money, and they use hatred to incite people to give them money. They just changed their format of hatred. Sometimes their hatred was directed at Jewish people. Sometimes their hatred was directed at Catholic people. Sometimes their hatred was directed at gay people or women or black people. Like, it just seems like they use hate as a way to get money. So Christian nationalists hold distinct views on the outcome of the presidential race of 2024. 2/3 of them and half of the sympathizers agree that God ordained Trump, which is terrifying. 1/3 of Americans are very confident democracy will hold strong, but the Christian nationalists are very confident in that. And they are more confident that Trump will leave peacefully. Yikes. Half-assed believer reminds me of that time my mom's friend called agnostic worse than the atheist right in front of me, an agnostic group. That he's Christian, but he's like not super passionate about it. Many people have questioned the depth of his religious affiliations. 63% of Americans did not believe he was religious despite his professed Christianity. Only 44% of Americans believe he's a Christian, but regardless, he has been able to really gain a lot of votes in that community. And in 2016, he said he had great relationships with Christian ministers. He's long been associated with Paula White Cain, who's a minister who he calls his personal pastor. She is a Christian nationalist and a Christian Trumpist who's very, very close with him. I just want to share you some gems that I found from her. In 2017, she said, "I've been called a heretic, an apostate, an adulterer, a charlatan, and an addict. It's been falsely reported that I once filed for bankruptcy and that I deny the Trinity. My life and my decisions have been nowhere near perfect, though nothing like what they've been falsely conveyed in recent days." She did enthusiastically support his decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel rather than Tel Aviv. In July 2018, on the Christian Broadcasting Network, while criticizing immigration advocates who cited the Gospel's account of Jesus migrating to Egypt, she said, I'm literally screaming, I don't mean to laugh. She literally said, yes, he did live in Egypt for 3.5 years, but it was not illegal. If he had broken the law, then he would have been sinful and he would not have been our Messiah. She said that about Jesus. And how do you even know it was 3.5 years? And how do you know it was legal? In January 2020, she was criticized for a sermon in which she prayed for a miscarriage of all satanic pregnancies, but then later she was like, that was a metaphor. I'm against abortion. Not that I judge anyone for these things, but I think it's worth noting she got married to a musician in 1985. They divorced in 1989. Their son was born in 1985, so that's screaming shotgun wedding to me. She was married to a different guy from 1990 to 2007. They met while at a church thing in Maryland where he was an associate pastor. They divorced their respective spouses and married each other. Wait, was she married to someone else at that time? The couple moved to Tampa and started the Without Walls International Church in 1991. In 2010, White and evangelist Benny Hinn were photographed leaving a hotel in Rome holding hands. Hinn's wife Suzanne filed divorce earlier that year. They denied that they committed adultery together. In 2011, White stated publicly that she once had a stroke and became addicted to prescription meds following the stroke. And then she married Jonathan Cain, a member of the rock band Journey, in 2015. So, I think it's fine to be married and divorced a bunch of times. Without Walls is ironic. But thank you for pointing that out. I think it's fine to get married and divorced a bunch of times. I don't think it's fine to be a judgmental bitch who's prejudiced. So we're going to finish this doom party with some final graphs and statistics. And I promise we'll end on a positive note. Who are more likely to support Christian nationalism by party and media consumption? People who do not watch TV news and are mainstream news watchers are strong rejectors. The adherents are in red, so far-right TV news, that's where most of them lie. That's not surprising. Support for Christian nationalism, you can see all Americans, white evangelical, Hispanic Protestant, black Protestant, and then it moves down from there. Unitarian Universalists coming in at 0. That's the religion I was raised in, and they're tied for the highest on rejectors. It's interesting that the Jewish faith has a very high level of rejectors when the pro-Israel, pro-Zionist movement is really closely tied. So that's like, again, what I was saying with the cognitive dissonance between those two groups, I find to be very, very interesting. So this is Christian nationalism by state is the first one, and then by white Americans is below that. They look very, very similar. The relationship between Christian nationalism and voting for Donald Trump, that is very, very much, I'm seeing some correlation there. The 3.5 years, this is from Astronomy and Knowing When Herod Died. I don't know what that is. Everyone I met that was raised UU have been super kind and chill. Thanks. So this is the last graph I want to show. This is moderately comforting. This is stats between 2007 and 2021. The numbers are looking like they're going more in our favor. So 2007, the federal government should advocate Christian values. 22% of people strongly agreed with that. Now it's only 15%. The federal government should allow prayer in schools. Went from 37 to 29. The federal government should allow the display of religious symbols in public spaces. Went from 29 to 22. The federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. That one didn't change that much. The federal government should enforce strict separation of church and state. This is my glimmer of hope. This is my light in the tunnel. That from 2007 to 2021, that went from 25% to 40%. That is a big jump, and that tells me that the vast majority of Americans are believing in church, the separation of church and state, because some would agree is at 22%, and that's 62, and that's good enough for me. The success of the United States being a part of God's plan, the strongly disagree is going up, but the strongly agree is going up too. I think that is a measure of like division and partisanism that we are seeing. But what I find comforting about this is that like I said, the majority of people are seeing the value of church and state. The recent events that I showed you, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, January 6th, I think opened some people's eyes to how important this is and how dangerous this is. Bad news is, cat's out of the bag a little bit and a bunch of y'all got used and played. But the good news is, according to that last graph, the number of people that believe in separation of church and state is rising and the number of Christian nationalists is falling. So the last thing I want to say before we play our game is always remember that power gets louder at the end. True power is in silence. The most powerful people are usually silent. So when you see groups like this kicking and screaming and clawing and being violent, that means they're scared and their numbers are dwindling. And the vast majority of Americans, in my opinion, are rational, kind people that care about themselves and their families and living a normal life. I truly believe that a lot of people are in religious psychosis right now, but I also believe that things will improve eventually. I hope that what we're seeing right now in our society is like a final battle cry of the Christian nationalist movement. I hope that this is the end of it. I don't know if I'm right, but I hope. They may have more money and a ton of power, but there's not that many of them, and their numbers are getting smaller. They're getting more passionate, and they're getting louder, but they are not getting bigger. That's what's important. They are not recruiting, they're losing numbers. So I know tonight was scary. I know that this was a long stream. I know that this was a lot to talk about, but that's what brings me like peace and hope, is that they are not recruiting anymore. Praying its extinction burst. So I hope that this was informative and you liked it. Here are all my sources. There were a lot of them. Lots of Wikipedia. We love Wikipedia. Check the sources on Wikipedia always. And next week, we're going to be streaming on a Monday about Courtney Stodden. If you do not know who she is an American media personality, model, and singer. She competed in a lot of beauty pageants and then became an international attention moment because when she was 16 years old, she married a 51-year-old actor predator named Doug Hutchinson. So we will be treating Courtney with the utmost respect and love because what the fuck? Who allowed that to fucking happen? That's horrifying. So let me set up our little game, and the stream is on Monday because we are going on vacation, which I am very, 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 very excited about. So You do not have to play, but this is just a little trivia game over what we learned today. If you want your name to come up on the screen, you can put it in there, or you can put in something funny. You don't need an account. I'm not trying to steal your data. Nothing of that nature. Nothing creepy or weird going on here. But I will just chat with some of you and see how we enjoyed this while you guys join this little Nearpod moment. We'll do the beach because I'm going to the beach and that'll be exciting for me. So I'll give you a sec to join this. Was this informative? Did you like it? Tell me I'm good. Tell me it was good. I'm kind of hungry. I had a really good dinner though. My fiance made like Mediterranean chicken, which is really good. And I made tzatziki and we had fresh dill and it was like the best tzatziki I've ever made in my life. You liked this? I felt like this was important to talk about, and like you said, was pretty good. Still nice to see a not religious view on it. There's definitely more things that could have been said in here and some details I left out, but I felt like I wanted to keep it very factual and informative and keep it in 1 week. This was very informative and I did enjoy it, but I am still scared. I'm scared too. I think fear is a valid emotion right now. This was a great stream. The depth of context helped me understand the topic so much better. I debated doing it as a two-parter, but I was like, it all just needs to be together because that's how I was seeing it. Drop the recipe. I don't know if this is authentic. Plain Greek yogurt, like couple spoonfuls of that, some lemon juice, fresh dill, salt, pepper, and a little bit of garlic, like paste. I freeze mine. I like blend garlic and then put it in the freezer, so just a little bit of that. And that's it. And just like adjust till you like it. Sometimes I make it too lemony or too garlicky and it's kind of gross, but this one like nailed it. Would love to know more about labor unions and leftist organizing. Me too. I should talk about that. I'll give people a couple more seconds to join and then we're playing because I'm tired and hungry. Add tahini, queen. Ooh, I don't think I have tahini, so I will get that. My friend just texted me that her stomach hurts. She said, not to bust her out, does your stomach ever hurt so bad you have to put your phone down when you're on the toilet? And I said, yes, sometimes I lay down on the tile. Who's Elbow Salad of Nearpod? I like your username. All right. I'll give people a few more seconds and then let's do this frickin' thing. This is a long stream, longest one we've had in a while. That's what she said. All right, if you have not joined, I'm turning my computer on Do Not Disturb, sorry friend. If you have not joined the game yet, it will let you join late. I like going between serious historical topics and fun, less serious ones. Yeah, I wouldn't say Courtney Stodden is fun, but it's very like pop culture-y, more like modern and less like the fate of our nation, even though it was the fate of her. But I get what you're saying. All right, I'm hitting start. If you haven't joined, it'll let you join late. Megatron, thank you for coming. And if you had to leave or you were late or whatever, all of these go on YouTube. Just finished making dinner. The length was perfect. That's what she said. I've been watching Special Forces just so I could see Cody Brown suffer. I would like this show more if it highlighted more of his suffering, but I do like it more than I thought I would. What are your thoughts on quizzes changing their name to Wayground? I do have thoughts on this. My students are pissed. They do not like it. This is my take. I think they were due for a rebrand because they're more than quizzes now. Like, they used to just have quizzes, but now they have games and lessons, but I don't love the name Wayground. That's my take on it. And also, my school didn't renew our premium subscription, and we're not supposed to use it anymore. Well, they didn't say we can't use it, but they were very explicit, like, that is not what you give test in. You give test in this other platform that we paid for. So they stopped paying for quizzes, which is annoying, because I know a lot of people really loved quizzes, myself included. It sounds like Waymo, the self-driving cars, and it's like Wayground. Like, it's like, ugh, way in the ground. I don't know, quizzes was just like fun, and I just don't like the name. But I do think they were right to rename it. I washed my hair today and it was like really desperately needed. It was so disgusting. I was at work today and I was like, wow, my hair is so greasy. I should like actually have to go to the UN about it. They wanted to update the name for the exact reason, but they wanted to sound like something kids love, so a playground. So dumb, but I'm so sad. I've really been using it this year. Yeah, it's a really good website. I get it now. Playground, Wayground. I didn't get it at first, though, so that makes it bad. It was Adolf Hitler. Do you guys know that last picture is Stalin? He's young there. What was important to the modern creator of Christian nationalism? It's getting dark so much earlier now. It's depressing, and daylight savings hasn't even happened yet. I'm sorry I used the young hot Stalin photo. Sorry. My bad. When was "under God" added to the Pledge of Allegiance? I tried to make the year one easier by giving you hints. And I forgot to put the year on the Great Depression. Oops. What Supreme Court ruling angered and inflamed the Christian nationalist movement? You guys did a good job on that one. Only 2 of you missed it. Sorry to those people. Agnostics rise up, and that's enough slices. Y'all's usernames kill me. What 1980s phenomenon grew the Christian nationalist movement? I'm glad you all liked the stream. I'm glad I finally fixed it so TikTok people can watch. That was broken for like a year. TV preachers. And then social media, more with the modern stuff. We didn't really have time to get into that. Which foreign nation is closely tied to Christian nationalism? Israel. Where was misredacted when the ADF was planning and plotting? Do y'all not get my joke? You don't get it. I was in the room where it happened. Okay, most of you got it right. That was just a hard question. Alrighty, we have Abby in first place, Agnostics rise up in second, a Sonic parking lot, Natalie, Strawberry, That's Enough Slices, K, Bye, Mel, Nova, Hannah, T, Pepper, Ava, Stationary Bike, Christian Rationalist, Chelsea, Ellen, Trash Bananas, Cat in the Box, Mad Mads, and I will scroll through the rest. Nice job. A mega church parking lot. Alright, I was like, I don't know what the resort looks like. Oh, I shouldn't have done a beach picture. It wasn't a beach resort. It's like a mountainy nature trails resort. Memes, anything to add, anything to share. I'm only going to stick around for probably like 2 minutes because like I said, it's late. Thanks for giving me hope today. I tried, OMG, you won and it's your first time playing. I tried to make this as approachable and informative as possible, but also end on a positive, which wasn't intentional, but it did, which was a nice surprise. Amazing stream, so informative. We're the moral majority. God. Great job, TikTok first-time viewer. I'm glad you're here. I am live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Next week it'll be Monday. Occasionally I do a Monday or a Wednesday. And when I say occasionally, like once, twice a year. Acetaminophen. Junior redacted hard at work. Oh, I like that painting. Maybe I should put that in my house. I'm a big fan of what we're seeing there. I was definitely looking for some kind of hotel. It went over my head. That's okay. The ADF and IDF are too close. Interesting point. This was really well crafted. Thank you. All right, I'll give people a couple more seconds to do any memes or anything that they want. I'm leaving at 9:25. I can't wait for the next Teacher Quit Talk app. Yes. I can't believe we got a Maryland mention this stream. This is like my read, donate, and share to Dr. Sufyan's GoFundMe. Situation is not fucking good. I know tonight we only talked about Israel for a little bit, but if you don't know, there is like a genocide very much happening at the hands of Israel. It's being funded by the United States in many ways due to a lot of the stuff that we talked about tonight.